All right, Frontal Blessings, we are live. Let me just do a little editing. Get my guest here, about to send a link over to her. Just bear with me. Just do a few little editing game here. Let me get live on Instagram. All right, we're live on Instagram. All right, so just edit real quick. All right. All right. All right, almost there, people. Just give everybody a couple minutes to get in. Get cracking. It's today's date. All right, I think we're good. Let's change that. That's correct. All right, we're good. All right, let's save. All right. All right, let me get the link over to my guest, and then I'll just run through a couple quick announcements for the blessings. Welcome, everybody. Doing a special show this evening. I'll bring my guest, Jasper, in shortly. About to send her over the link. I just want to run through some quick announcements. We did have a class earlier today. I'll be posting, having that time to post it for those on Patreon. Busy day. I'll get to that hopefully after this. I'll get it uploaded. We also have one more class left for this month on the 22nd. We have a ritual, the Lucifer Emperor Hell ritual at the end of the month. All that's taking place on Patreon. So if you are interested in participating in the 3 private monthly classes that I do and the monthly group ritual that I do, I encourage you to check out the Primordial Chaos Patreon page at patreon.com/Baniti. That's patreon.com/Baniti, and join tier 3. That'll give you access to the 3 private classes and the monthly ritual. Also, you can individually sign up for the classes, but as I said many times before, it's better if you join tier 3. It's a better as far as price-wise and value-wise. So check that out. If you're interested in a reading, I offer all different kinds of readings, shadow work readings, which is a great place to start, point you in the right direction, deity readings to see which spirits and demons walk with you, Santa Muerte readings, Egyptian oracle readings, Clepothic demonic readings. There's a few different ones I offer, etc. If you're interested in any of those readings or a spiritual consultation, shoot me an email. It's going right on the bottom of the screen there and across the ticker, khnum19@gmail.com. That's how you can get at me to set up a reading or a consultation. If you are serious about booking one right out the gate, please put the days and times you're available and the time zone that you live in. It just saves the back and forth, and then I can tell you immediately what I have available, and I can send you a list of readings and the prices, and then we can kind of go from there. All right, so that's the Patreon page. That's the classes. I'll be posting some new content in a few weeks for May. We also have the Journey of the Black Adept Conference, the 6th annual, that's coming up in October. I can't believe we're in April already. Before you know it, October will be here. So we got a lot of good things we're throwing around. Nothing officially set in stone yet, but we got a good idea on some itineraries. We try to make it, different, change it up every year. So we're looking forward to that. And hopefully we see some a new set of people this year. Again, last year we had all new people except for like 2, I think. So hopefully we see some returning people, some new people. But we'll talk more about that. I'll keep pumping it out there as we get closer to the event. Okay. Other than that, I think I covered everything just basically to get us going. Everything I'm saying is going right across the bottom of the ticker. Don't forget to hit the like button. The more likes the videos get, it spreads the video out, helps the algorithm, as they say. And definitely check out our other social media platforms, which we're live on all 3 of our platforms. Primordial Chaos here on YouTube. Also check us out on Primordial Chaos 9, all one word, on Instagram, which we're streaming live on there right now. And then also check out Primordial Chaos, 2 words, on Facebook. And we're streaming live on Facebook now as I speak. So support all the platforms, hit the like buttons, support the classes, support the Patreon page. Again, patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti, and tier 3 is the way to go. Let me send the link over to my guest and notify her that it's in her box. And we'll get her in here and get going. All right. Just sent it. Let me reach out to her and let her know it's in there so she knows. Hold on. Let me grab my phone. All right, that's what I'm missing over here. All right. Tight. All right, just sent her over the link, so she should be here shortly. While we're waiting, I don't know if some of you guys saw on the Primordial Chaos 9 Instagram page. Let me tell you something. That fact-checking shit I was telling people today in the Patreon class. So this morning, I posted a thing on the origins of Easter and how it tied back into Ishtar, and how it's really a holiday that represents fertility and sex energy, as far as the eggs, the Easter bunny, the equinox, and all that. And if you are familiar with fact check, it's like this automated policing system of the internet. It's just it's more of them to continue to protect the propaganda that they promote. So basically, they deem if something is facts or not fact, and they just tell you not facts. So it's funny. I put the post out, and they put we found this post deemed to not be factual. Now, the fucked up part about it is they don't tell you why. They don't tell you how they come to that conclusion. They just make that, statement, and then they don't even give you evidence or information you can go to support, which is confirmation how I've been saying they're really trying to control every facet, of how we think. They're really trying to control everything that they filter out and what they want you to accept. Because today in the Ancestral Occult Bible study class, we did a thorough breakdown on this whole Holy Week thing, the origin of Easter. We went into the Bible and we're breaking down. It was a really good class, a lot of information. And the crazy thing about it, I was telling people in the Patreon, when I had originally, put the classes up back at the end of March, didn't even really realize that class was going to fall on the so-called Easter weekend. So it all worked out perfectly. And once I saw that yesterday, I said, wait a minute, this would be a good thing. And we're going into the Egyptian roots of Christianity. And we're going over a lot of things in that class. It's a really good class, especially if anybody is looking really to find a class where you're coming out. Now, you don't have to be coming out of that religious system, but some people are still struggling with that. It's really good for people in regards to that. And some people just want the knowledge and the information. It's a great tool. Unfortunately, regardless of how long we're on this path, we live, in a culture and a society where that Christian influence, that monotheistic influence is heavy. And regardless, even if, some people say, well, I never really grew up in a very strict religious or Christian family. But if you grew up here in the West, in America, you're exposed to this shit, constantly. So there's that level of indoctrination and programming that sometimes is there on a very subliminal and subconscious level. But I've done this class on and off over the years, and it's really helped people who are trying to deprogram themselves, from that religious programming. And sometimes, again, the hard part is when it's on a subconscious level. Sometimes you may not catch it, but it manifests in your actions, your approach, your mindset. For some of us who have been on this path for a while, and some of us who have, mastered that to the point where it's not a hindrance or a blockage like that to us, it's easy for us to see that and detect it. I can always notice it sometimes in people's line of questioning because it's ingrained in their questioning. Some people still struggle with the whole understanding deity, spirit, God, everything is still aesthetic to a lot of people. They don't understand, when we say that this is a journey inside out, they don't know how to differentiate between internal and external experiences. And really, this path is a combination of both, right? It's understanding the origin of those experiences do come from within the subconscious mind, do come from within the psyche, or manifestations of what you tap into. But there is an external experience to it. But knowing how to decipher that, and this is why I keep saying the job and the goal about this path is being able to harmoniously blend your subjective conscious or subjective reality with your objective conscious and your objective reality. So it's really understanding how both of those work and how you can connect and infuse them, because that's really when your spiritual path starts to take off on a whole nother level. And a lot of that lack of understanding that I was just talking about, a lot of it unfortunately comes from religious programming. And I'm telling you, it's even this still can affect people who you could be out of religion, say, oh, well, I left the church or I left that religion years ago, and not realize there's still some psychological residue there that's affecting you. And I know this to be fact because people have come to me on the side in consultations and in classes and have come outright and said, hey, look, I'm struggling with this or I'm struggling with that. And you know what? And that's okay. That's step one, recognizing it. And step two now is, creating work to address that. Right. You have to understand, you could be on this path for years, or you can come on this path at 25, 30, 35, 40 years old. You got to remember, from the moment you came on that path, there's still all that years of deprogramming that needs to be addressed. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen overnight. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen in a few days or a few weeks. You got to give yourself time. And one of the hardest things sometimes for people to do is be patient with themselves, right? Everybody wants everything quick. Everybody thinks everything's going to happen, Johnny on the spot. Like I'm gonna get it all lickety split. It just doesn't work like that, man. Okay, you really have to understand the process. No results can manifest if there's no consistency, fueling those results. And that's why it's very important to do your due diligence in your ritual work. Make sure you are consistent. Don't get frustrated because you did one or two things and, hey, man, it's not working. I don't know, something's wrong. No, it's not that it's not working. It's just you're not consistent in anything that you're doing, okay? You have to be consistent in what you do. It's the only way you're going to get the results that you are desiring, okay? So I'm just going to continue building. I know Dragon Jasper's on the way. She texted me. So as soon as she gets here, we'll get into it. But check it out. We were building on that today. It was a interesting conversation. Fact checkers is hilarious, man. It's just that the thing we have to be careful of, and we're on it right now. A lot of us use a lot of these platforms, right? Rightfully so. We have to make sure we don't become dependent on these platforms. So what's happening is, as these social media platforms are getting bigger and bigger over the years and expanding, it's as if some people, and we know, you might know some of these people, unfortunately you might be one of them. Some people have become so dependent on these platforms. That's been their goal, to get it to that point and then institute all these systems of control. You understand what I'm saying? Because now it's getting to the point where they're trying to filter out what they want to filter to you. All right, I got my guest here. Let's bring her in. Let's add it to the stream. Dragon Jasper, how you doing? Can you hear me?
What's poppin', everybody? Hi, Baniti.
How you doing?
We
can hear you loud and clear. You sound good. You sound clear.
Awesome. That's so good, because I got a fan on in the background, y'all. It is hot.
Yeah, you look like, I see that. I see dapping with the got the little towel thing there. All right, well, I appreciate you for coming by. So obviously, since this is your first time on the show, we got to do the format where we get people familiar with you. So we're going to do a brief interview about you for a little bit, and then we'll get into some topics. And anything you want to discuss, anything you want to share, you just let me know. We'll run through that. Well, first and foremost, for those that may not know you, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, kind of a little bit about where you're from, and anything you want to share about yourself. And then also throughout the show, share with us how people can contact you, websites, social media platforms, things of that nature. So let's start there. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. Now, before I introduce myself with this loaded question, there is something that I need to say first. Because of the place of domicile that I'm from, I want to let everyone know that this is for entertainment purposes only. So no problems, no bad vibes, just, entertainment. Now we can get on with the real stuff. My name is Jasper. That's my actual name. And I go by Dragon Jasper because, I really connected with the dragon imagery. I have 2 dragon tattoos, one on the back of my neck, one on my torso. And, I could say a lot about myself, but I'll start with, I'm from the Bahamas. That's where I live. What I do a lot of stuff right now. On my day side, like I told you, I am doing Reiki and tarot readings. I won't say too much about my day job because it's very boring. But that's the exciting half of what I do. I have been doing the spiritual journey consciously since 2017. I have been an energy practitioner for about a year now, in Reiki and other energy attunements like Lucifer, Belial, Asmodeus, Lilith, Kali, Ganesh. I am a practicing Hindu as well. So that's a basic rundown of me as a person, and I'm 31 years old, for anyone who cares about that.
Okay. Cool. Now, I don't know if Sherry King is in the building, but shout out to Sherry King. She's the one that hit me to your YouTube channel. So shout out to Sherry King, and she's in the building. So let me ask you a few questions, and then I want to talk about, obviously, I know I've been putting your channel out there. I know people have reached out to me that went to it, and we definitely want to talk about that because that's one of the key features, not the only, because there is a lot of things and a lot of elements to who you are and what you do. So let's talk a little bit. Before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit more in depth about your personal journey. So let's go back. Let's go back to the beginning stages prior to the occult. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing. How were you raised? Were you raised in a Christian household? Maybe tell us a little bit about the early years. So I want to try to build a picture to people of kind of how you got to that point in 2017 to the present moment. So let's start in your early, your childhood years. Let's start there.
Boy, you asking some loaded questions today, Benizi. I'm not gonna lie to you. So for those people who don't know, and I realize, even though people hear about the Bahamas and we have it as a dream destination, vacation destination, this is a really pretty tough place to grow up in, especially if you are a left-hand minded person. I did grow up in a very Pentecostal household, and just to briefly explain what Pentecostal is, it's very I'll say aggressive Christianity,
Right.
where it's like turn or burn. They do the faith healing thing,
Mm-hmm.
and they just it's a very wild side of Christianity to grow up in. My parents always had a televangelist on in the house.
Mm.
I didn't have the best upbringing, I will say. I did not grow up very well. I ended up raising myself in a lot of situations. And now that I have a lot of hindsight, I can see where I had a lot of spiritual guidance back then as well.
Right.
I had my first psychic experience when I was very young, like 3 years old. And it frightened me because you don't have an understanding at that time, obviously. Like, you don't know what's going on at all.
Right. No,
So,
and let me just interject. It's crazy that you say that. I hear a lot of people realize even before they were on this path, they have something, like that happen. And, you like you say, you don't know what it is at that time. And, it's crazy listening to you talk, as you say, so I know everybody has a different story of where they came from, especially from a religious background, but I'm gonna let you continue, but that sounds like some pretty hardcore religious programming. That's
let
pretty
me
hard.
tell you.
Yeah. Go ahead. Let me not stop. No, go ahead.
I could go on for days about that and, the ways that it impacted me as a person. But a lot of people do talk about the negative side of that, but I did glean a positive side out of that. It made me a more sensitive person. It helped
Right.
me to understand subtle energy to a degree. And
Okay.
it also helped me to understand, the power of prayer.
Okay.
People think prayer is only for Christians, and it's really not. It's really not.
That's
It's really
interesting.
not.
Yeah.
Because when we think about prayer, we think that it's, help me, Jesus, like fix it, Jesus type vibe. But
Mm-hmm.
it's really like an energetic connection to the energy that you're communing with. So, like, you can pray to yourself, you can pray to Lucifer, you can pray to Lilith, you can pray to whoever your primary gods are and goddesses, etc. But prayer is that sound connection that you have to the divine.
Right. And I'm glad, like as I say, when I say glad, I'm listening to you talk, and I tell people that's one way of deprogramming some of the religious programming. When you look back, and as you just described, when you're saying prayer, you're not talking about prayer in a religious form. You're showing how you looked at it, and like you said, it's not just pray hallelujah, praise Jesus. You made it more personal, and I tell people that's what you got to do. You have to go back. And whatever you came up under, whatever experience, it's great to look at it in that context perspective. So glad to hear you say that. So explain to me. So you did it. You had, a psychic experience when you were younger. Obviously, there was elements of spirit being present there even before you was on this path. But what would you say when you go back to the beginning stages of getting on this path, right? What would you say? Was there a defining moment? Was it something particular you could trace it back? Was it something going on at that time, or did something wake you, or what got you to this point?
I would say that I had a series of crises of faith. So there was a time when I came back from college. I was in college in Orlando, and I had been homeless for a while. And when I came back to my situation here at the time in Nassau, it was just not good.
Okay.
And I just lost all my belief that I had in everything. And this is a far cry from who I thought myself to be. Like, I had always considered myself to be a person of faith. And to the point where I was visiting synagogues in Florida and just, trying to figure it out, trying to find that sense of community that, I thought I had found in the church, which obviously I ain't there no more. So
Right.
that wasn't real. But at that time, I just was exploring different religions. I joined this, ad hoc mystery school down here where they were just chatting about different topics. Like, I joined in the middle of the section where they were discussing the Bhagavad Gita and Krishna and Shiva and all these people. Sorry, gods and goddesses. But that was what really awakens me and reminded me that there's more than meets the eye. I'm a very curious person by nature, so I wasn't really thinking about, what is right, what is wrong. I was just looking and searching.
Okay. So that's interesting. Yeah. And it always, I always ask people that because, sometimes I know there's factors, there's things going on in somebody's life, or there's a turning point, a key moment, something inspires, the person to kind of make that shift. So as you started to, explore those things, I know kind of where you're at now. Talk a little bit about what that led you to, or talk a little bit about, the kind of work you're doing right now, or kind of what you're studying, you're into, just to give us a little idea of kind of where that's gauged you to today.
Boy, wow. When you think about it, you don't. It doesn't seem like much until you really, think about it hard and
Right.
you see how far you've come. Back then, I didn't know anything. I was dumb. I was one of them dumb kids who was just like, "Ooh, let me try to raise my Kundalini by myself, like a dumbass," which I tried, and subsequently ended up having to spend 3 days in the dark. So don't do that by yourself, y'all. Don't be dumb like me. But
So Kundalini's not all pleasant, huh? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah. Y'all, no.
Exactly.
Anyway, I was sucked into the love and light, love and
Love and nice, peace and love, hair grease, running through naked grass fields and all that shit.
Butterflies and sunflowers.
Yeah.
I got sucked into that, and I had nobody around me at the time to be like, "Did you being dumb? Stop."
Exactly. Exactly. So I know you're doing, from in our conversations, I know you're doing shadow work. You are exploring some different paths. Share a little bit about that. But before you do that, so I don't forget, and make sure we do this a few times. Again, if you just joined or you came in late, we're talking to Dragon Jasper. Also, let's tell the people the best way, or the best your platforms where they can contact you. And also, as before we continue the conversation, let people know the services you do offer, because you do offer some interesting services.
Okay, so you can reach me on Instagram at Dragon Jasper Energy. You can find me on YouTube at Dragon Jasper. You can just search for me. I think it's Dragon Jasper Occult Music or something like that. And you can reach me on my website, the fastest, which is dragonjasper.com. What I do on my YouTube primarily is I record and create, I'll call them now Draconic ends for beings such as Lucifer, Lilith, Asmodeus, Paimon,
And Dragon
Ine.
Jasper, explain to people just who may not know. Explain to people what an N is. Just give them the explanation so they understand.
To make it very quick, it's something similar to a mantra where it connects you directly to the spirit of choice.
So what inspired you to, because a lot of people, I mean, even some people in the chat, like Eastwards, they're saying your music is fire, the stuff you create. What was the inspiration behind that? How did you, because that's interesting, because we obviously in the occult, there's not many channels like that out there. So that's one thing about your YouTube channel that stands out, it's unique. Now, do you use that type of practice a lot in your ritual work, etc.? What was the inspiration behind it?
I do. So, like I said, I practice Hinduism. I wouldn't say I am a practicing Hindu, but it is part of my practice. And I listen to mantras. I learned about mantras from Hinduism and the impact that they can have on the mind, on the body, and on your life itself. Sound is extremely powerful. We tend to take the things that we say for granted. We tend to take, songs for granted when we listen to them. We don't consider the deep impact that these things have on us when you hear them over and over again, receive the same messaging repeatedly.
Right.
So that's where my basic inspiration started. And one day, this is when I was living in Harbor Island a couple of years ago, I was looking for, Luciferian ends, and I realized that there weren't any. Like they're all spoken, chanted, recorded. No hate to any of the groups doing that out there. I think it's a great start, and it's what helped to educate me on, how these ends were composed from a vocal and literary standpoint, I guess.
Right.
That's the best way I can describe.
Right.
But I really wanted there to be some music for Luciferians, for Luciferian people, for left-hand path people, because these are beings that, in my animist way, I love them very much. They are equally as important if not in my opinion, even more important now than ever before. Right?
Yes. And again, I would encourage people, those ends can be used for meditations, mantra, chanting, silent meditation, focusing on the word. These are tools and things I agree, in my opinion, we need. And as I said before, we all have gifts, right? And that's why I'm trying to bring people on that are making a contribution, newer people, right? We all know of the mainstream people that have been out there for a while. And again, it's no knock on them. I'm one of them. I've been out here for, quite a bit now. So I'm trying to let other voices be heard, right? That's the goal. So when we look at, because you have quite a few different ends on there dealing with a lot of deities. So obviously, when you look at the channel, obviously you have to have some type of work or connection with them, to do that. So now I'm going to pick your brain about different aspects. No, I say this with, I want to pick your brain in a very, straightforward way, because I want people to see your perspective on different aspects of the path. So as you know, we talk a lot about shadow work, right? Shadow work is a huge thing. It's a huge pillar, a huge foundation, in my opinion, on this path. So if you could share with the people what is your approach to shadow work? I don't know if there's anything you want to share. You don't have to be detailed. You can share in an indiscreet way, and just give you some of your thoughts on doing shadow work. How has it helped you or not helped you? And just give the people some feedback, because I want them to hear some, from females sharing that. Sometimes always us dudes just sharing it, but let's hear you talk a little bit about that.
Wow. So shadow work is heavy. That's the first thing that I want to say. It's not supposed to be easy. That's what I feel. I have been doing a lot of shadow work over a lot of, basically the extent of the time that I've been walking this path. And it took me a while to really understand, what it means to clear blocks, what it means to create space for yourself as a person, because it requires vulnerability. It requires that you understand who you are and accept who you are as a person. But sometimes it's a lot. Like, you don't want to see the fact, like, oh, I've been horrible to this person, and now you figure out why. But like, it's hard to look at that, and it requires a very honest, sometimes very embarrassing and scary look in the mirror.
Yeah. And rightfully so. I always tell people, when those things are coming to the surface, though they may not be, the things you're looking to experience or want to experience, but I tell them that's confirmation that what you're doing is working, and that stuff should come up. You're gonna feel the embarrassment, the shame, the sadness, the pain, the joy. There's all facets and aspects of it. So in your experience with doing, shadow work, right? And as you start to understand the true self, you start to journey on this path. And I know we've had conversations about this. What kind of changes did you see manifest in your life, in your environment, person, places, things, all that? Like what?
What changes didn't I see, Baniti? Yeah, what changes didn't I see?
That's a better way to phrase that question. Yeah, share that. Because
I'll share my biggest struggle. My biggest struggle has always been my vulnerability, right? Like, how vulnerable to be with somebody, when it's appropriate to be vulnerable with somebody, how much to share, when to share, like all of the appropriateness and everything else involved in being actually open and vulnerable with not just one person, but using that to try to reach others. And there was a time in my life when I was very vocal about different stuff, but I wouldn't call that vulnerability. I would say that was me sharing my opinion very loudly and sometimes very wrongly on a lot of different things, right?
Right.
Vulnerability to me now is being your full self, like being not just soft and gentle, but especially as a Black woman or a woman in general in 2023, not just being soft and gentle, but being able to share things with others that assist in their healing as well. Being willing to be not the voice of reason, but the voice of wisdom, right? Because there's a difference. Reason requires you to do mental work. It requires that you see a path clearly and logically. This path is not like that. Shadow work is not. This shit ain't logical at all, right?
Oh,
Like you could start at point A and end up at point Q, and you haven't even crossed through point B through
that's correct.
R yet, right?
That's
And
correct.
so it requires a lot of patience. And what I'm learning now is how to trust, right? Because the whole point of shadow work is to lead you back to this big self that we all have, right? This
Right.
big soul, not just the interconnectedness part of it, but like the deeper sight, the deeper feeling.
Right.
And we are taught many times to ignore our emotions, to ignore how they show up in our body, to ignore the signals that we receive.
Right.
But that's not healthy and that's not safe.
No.
So right now, for me, shadow work is very personal. It's very physical, and it's very it's deep because it requires almost a level of like spiritual surgery on yourself, where you have to be like, I need to pull this out. I need to
That's a good term. Yes.
take this out and examine this, right?
Right. So there's two words that stand out to me in listening to you talk, and I'm gonna have to pick your brain a little harder. And again, I don't ever put a guest on the spot. You could always be discreet. Don't expect anybody to share anything personal or detailed. Please don't. You could always do it in a very non-discreet way. Two words stand out: vulnerability and trust. Now, when you say the vulnerability, are you talking on all levels with people in general? Is it a combination of friendships, personal relationships, or is it just the way you dealt with people as a whole? So let's talk about the vulnerability thing first, and then we'll get to the trust thing.
Wow. So I had this horrible habit of just keeping up this big icy shell, right? And I didn't even know that it was there until a few years ago. This is something I have been carrying around with me, for my own protection. And what really stood out, when it really stood out for me, was I went for my first ever, in-person Reiki session.
Okay.
And the lady who was doing my Reiki, she came up to me after the session. She was like, "I'm tired. You've been fighting me this whole time. Like you have these. I have been having to talk to your guides and ask them, like,
Right. It was
let
draining
them know what's going
experience.
on." And she looked exhausted, and she said to me, she's like, your spirit guides, they are not, they don't play about you, like.
Mm.
And she's like, no black stones for you. No black stones for you. Because my field was so closed off to everything. Just
Right.
that shell, And I didn't even recognize that was happening. Like I had been using Reiki for a while, and I was like, why doesn't this take? Why doesn't this work? Why doesn't this blah blah blah? Freaking out, right? But it turns out like it was me, and it was all those defenses that I had built up over 30 years, blocking out not just negative things, not just harm and evil, but like blessings too. So this is why vulnerability is important. You need to be permeable enough for your blessings to arrive to you,
Right.
for the good things in your life to arrive to you, so that you can be open to the experience of life. Like pain and strength and resilience are all part of life. Right? They are difficult and they suck, but they are part of life, and we have to be able, going back into trust ourselves enough so that we are able to be open to those experiences and understand that if something does happen, we are now equipped to not only handle it, but overcome it.
That's key, overcoming it. So let me ask you this, and it's funny you bring the, well, I hate to keep using that term. It's not funny. It's funny. But it's interesting because we talk a lot about that in the shadow work classes, right? So people who, maybe, and everybody deals with that. We all deal with it on, certain levels, but obviously there's some people who've had, more issues with that. So let's just say from a female perspective, you just explained about overcoming it. How do you rebuild? Because like, let me give you an example. And I'm not just limiting your situation to, I'm just going to use, let's just say a woman who is in toxic relationships. I'm just using that example, and I'm not applying that to you. But let's just say a woman who keeps going from one toxic relationship to another because maybe she's leaving herself open and vulnerable, and it could be insecurity issues. It could be because she doesn't want to be alone, or there's something there, or maybe it's something she, as we talk about in shadow work classes, she was, seeing her entire life, maybe through her mother, etc. How do you? What's the process when you talk? I want to get to the overcoming process. I'm just using this as the model. How do you start to rebuild the trust, right? In your opinion, without shutting everybody out. You know what I'm saying? Because some people, then they get trust issues and they completely shut down. They become completely introverted. So in your experience from a female's perspective, because men, we might be a little bit more, try to be so macho about it. And that doesn't help either. That can destroy certain things. But how do you start to rebuild that trust process without shutting everybody out is what I'm trying to say.
Now, first of all, I will come clean and say I was that woman. I was her. So I know her very well.
Right.
I'm not going to front. That's one thing I will never do. I'll never front and pretend like, I have too much pride to say, where I came from.
Right.
The trust issues didn't start with the relationships. They didn't start there. They started before that. And what I would say to any woman, who's going through something similar is you don't know how to be vulnerable. You don't know who to trust yet. So the reason you keep going back to the toxic situations is because you don't understand what trust is. Like you don't understand what love is yet. You have the potential to. It's an willingness to. But until you can protect yourself, until you understand that you are the one who needs protection.
Right.
You don't understand vulnerability and trust as yet. And that's a tough thing to come to terms with because your heart can be open and you can be using it to love. You can be using it to all these things to connect, but it can be broken at the same time.
Right.
I mean, you can feel it in your body. You will know. As a woman, you will know when a man or whoever else is not right for you. You will know because your body will tell you every time. She don't miss. She don't miss. She ain't missing nothing.
Right. Exactly.
Nothing. She ain't missing nothing.
Right.
But you have to trust your own self. You have to trust yourself to be alone first. Because if you don't trust yourself in your own company, that's a bad sign. That's a huge red flag.
Right.
You don't trust yourself to be alone because there's something in you that you are running from.
Right. No, it makes sense. And that's why I wanted to hear it, from your perspective. So, because, the thing that happens sometimes is when people deal with traumas or things that are affecting them on a mental level, I'm hearing you addressing it. You have an approach. And as you say, there's that sense there of trusting yourself. We all get that sometimes that intuition, and unfortunately sometimes we completely ignore it, and it can be very damaging. But I ask that question because I do sometimes see it starts to sometimes for some it starts to get worse because they think the solution is shutting down completely, and that's not the solution, right? The solution.
Now, I want to say something else about that too, because you did mention living your life through the eyes of your mother, right? Now, this is a very difficult thing to unpack because we all have ancestry, and some of us, we won't know our ancestry. Like some people are adopted, so they won't know their birth mother.
Correct.
Some people know their birth mother, but don't know their father. Some people are trying to trace, their grandmothers and all that stuff through these lineages, but have trouble doing it. I will say if there's anything that is recurring like that, like repeatedly, definitely look at that a bit deeper. Because I've been doing a lot of work with Saturn. I just finished my Saturn return. I made a chart. I know we don't do traditional astrology on here, but working with Saturn in the last few years it has changed my perspective on being an adult responsibly and the cycles that we put ourselves through that are actually supposed to just be lessons.
Right.
So from a female perspective on that, I would definitely, if you can't get to your mother and if you need to walk through your ancestry, and you don't know all of your grandmothers. Like I don't know all of them, but look at that deeper and really intuit where that comes from. Do some meditations on that. Stare out the window, go outside, talk to the moon. The moon is a great mother figure for me,
Right. Right. And that's a good point. So let's shift it a little bit, because now I want to shift. You mentioned ancestors, right? So let's, this, depending on, obviously there's different approaches and different systems and paths, whether you're, right hand, left hand, new age, African, traditional, spiritualist, etc. If you can share with us, do you have a regular ancestral practice? Do you work with an ancestral altar, etc.? What is your approach on, I know you just shared a little bit, but your overall general ritualistic approach, or your overall work with your ancestors, if there's anything like that there you could share?
The one thing I will share is water.
Mm-hmm.
Less water and just serving your ancestors water.
Okay.
I don't know how to describe the power of doing that, because it is potent, it is strong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you have I don't participate in African traditional religions.
Okay.
And if you are like me, or you have no rhyme or reason in how to start connecting with them, that is what I would recommend starting with. Like, create a nice protective circle for yourself. Just put some less cool water now. Like, I would recommend no hot water or no lukewarm nastiness.
No, that's a no.
But that's where you start, and you pray. You say to your benevolent ancestors, "We're willing to help you." You gotta be specific as hell.
Yes.
And that is the basis of my practice.
Okay, so you don't have an altar set up with photos of them, or a shrine, or anything like that. Any work, just kind of just a practice that you directly go in. Or just
no, I've never had a photo of my ancestors on my altar.
Okay.
I don't feel like that was something that I was particularly called to. I know my sister was doing work like that before, but I learned their names. My way of connecting with them was going all the way back as far as I possibly could historically.
Yeah. No, and that's why I asked the question, because it's interesting that, again, on this path, we're not, traditionalists in the sense that we don't go by one. There's not one specific way to do anything. And it's interesting. I like people to share. And it's funny you say water. Water is the most, I tell people, watering is the most powerful offering across the board, whether it's your ancestors working with spirits and demons, because obviously it's the highest form of representation of life, right? Cool water. And sometimes people think, and especially in more traditional systems, they think when it comes to the ancestors, you got to go all out and feed them all this stuff. That's something that is a traditional belief. Now, I tell people you have to be careful. Now, years ago when I was in those traditional systems, yeah, I was into that consistent feeding the ancestors. But what I learned, as you start to grow and have a higher understanding, you got to be careful also when you're feeding some benevolent spirits. Like, this is why you might hear me say sometimes, we sometimes got ancestors that when they were here, they were alcoholics or criminals or drug addicts, right? And you don't want to keep pouring rum for an alcoholic, right? So, you got to look at those things. So be careful with the constant feeding, because that could be making some of these benevolent spirits stronger without you even knowing it. And it makes their presence in your altar space stronger, and that could open the door to walk-ins, right? Sometimes people's behaviors change and they don't know it, etc. But I like your approach, the way you just described it, very simple, straight to the point. And again, as long as there's that connection, that's important. Okay. So there's a question here. This is from Yuswaj. It says, this is to you. Did you do DNA to trace back your ancestry, or just word of mouth from family members when you were just talking? Did you do any ancestral? That's from Yuswaj in the chat.
Now, because of where I'm from, we are not part of the United States. So we don't have access to that kind of software or technology. I cannot accurately give my my DNA to one of these companies and have them trace my ancestors one by one, because
Okay.
they won't have my ancestors' DNA. What I
Gotcha.
did was historical records. I went online and I searched for each of the records that I could possibly find using the word of mouth that I got from my mother and the other people, like my aunts and my family. Like, they were really good at keeping an oral tradition, so I went back and backed that up with physical paper.
Right.
Right? And that's what really helped me to find their names, their birth records, marriage records, death records, everything. Even family members, side family members, because sometimes the Caribbean people be down here doing shady
Right.
stuff. Even side family members that I didn't even know I had.
Right.
So
that's how you got the names then. That would explain how you got the exact names, correct?
exactly, yeah.
Okay. But that's a really good question from
question.
Swat. Yeah, you guys can just keep putting the questions in the chat. That one just caught my eye. I was looking to the right and you were talking about it. So I figured let me throw that out there. But yeah, the ancestral practice, again, I tell people sometimes it's not necessary to go completely all out. Yeah, you don't have to do all this extravagant. Now again, I'm not knocking anybody. If anybody's listening, watching, I just want to be clear. I'm not criticizing and knocking you if you do, right? But there's sometimes, and not just with ancestral work, it could be ritual work across the board. Sometimes people think you have to do this all, drawn out, glamorous, heavy laden ritual, and they think that automatically equals getting results. Sometimes doing something very simple, basic to the point, it could be something that takes a few minutes, can be just as effective as something somebody plans and carries out for 2-3 hours, right? So it's interesting,
It's intention.
Yeah.
It's intention. If you do a ritual that takes you 9 hours and you just like throwing stuff around and you don't care, nothing's going to happen.
Exactly. But people do it, and the problem with that is these are the same people that will turn around and they will say things like, I'm not getting results, or it's not working, or nothing's changing for me. Well, part of that is what you just said, right? All right. So outside of the answer, I'm sorry. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Oh, there was.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
One thing that we, especially as Black people, we need to pay more attention to is listening. We need to sit down, shut the hell up, at least for 5 minutes a day, and listen. Because it's a lot of things that keep repeating in our community, not just in America, but worldwide, in the Black story, that can stop. And we need to understand the power of listening. Because when I sit down and I listen to my ancestors and they show me things like, this is a cycle that has been repeating for this long, or this has been going on for this, the depth of what you can observe means you can do more healing there. You can release more things there. I have been doing ancestral healing work, like hands-on hard shit on my family for years. But the results that I see, I can't express how worth it is. Like, I watch people become financially free. I watch people, give up habits. I myself have given up habits, and changed my life because I sat down and I listened. And not only listened, but made the changes. So that's just something I would highly recommend. And not just for Black people, obviously, for anyone who's experiencing, their family going through cycles. Because sometimes you're not the problem. We inherit some of these things that we be going through, and we don't even know.
Right. And I've addressed that a bunch of times on here, the listening and hearing thing, right? It's a huge thing. People hear. Yeah, but listening is it's a whole nother level. And it reminds me of, there's an old saying of the sages when you go into alchemy, right? No prophet or sage or mystic ever received a revelation while they were talking, right? There's science behind that, right? You're right. Think about it. And when you go into a lot of these, say, lesser religions or religious philosophies, they're talking all the time, right? Because as you just described, when you sit down and you listen, and part of that, I keep telling people, when you're doing, and again, it doesn't have to just be with the ancestors. Just want to make that clear to everybody. It could be the ancestors. It could be working with a specific deity. People always think, and the listening part is critical here. People always think when you're doing some type of ritual work, whether again it's with your ancestors or it's with a spirit, a god, or a goddess, that you're going to see something, right? Everybody's always looking to see something. And I keep telling people one of the most powerful confirmation of your work is to listen for that voice that you just described. Sometimes it's an inner voice. Sometimes it's a thought. And you can't get that if you're not listening and you're not silent and you're not quiet, right? So if you can share with everybody listening, when you explain what you just said, do you sometimes literally hear a voice? Is it just clear thoughts that come through? How does it work for you?
Now, there are a lot of different spiritual abilities, right? Like you can talk about all the clairs, clairaudience, clairsentience. You can even have clairolfaction. You can have the ability to taste subtle energy, if that's so,
Right.
you know. But so I think I'm trying to draw three things together at once. It's the listening, it's the being alone, and it's the sensation that you get when you are listening and alone, right? Because for you to get magical results, you need to understand the pathway that you're taking to get there, right? Even if the universe or whatever you believe in doesn't come right out and put a human being in your face and say, oh yeah, that spell you did last night, it worked, you know.
Right.
You don't need that. If you are attuned to your senses, like your strongest psychic sense, you might have one, you might have a few.
Right.
If you are attuned into that, you cannot miss because it will be right 100% of the time.
Right.
And this is why I strongly believe, and I have experienced, when you are invested in your magic, when you are invested in your practice, it works 100% of the time. So if you're not getting results, that means you got to tap in deeper than you tapped in now, right?
Right.
So for me personally, I love audio. Like I have very strong clairaudience, right? Like I get a lot of different thoughts about a lot of different things, and sometimes I dismiss it like that ain't nothing, and then it will appear in front of my face, and I'm like, oh yeah, I wasn't listening.
Gotcha.
Right. Like you can experience subtle energy with your skin. Like let's say you're outside and somebody walked past you and all the hairs on your arms and your legs and everything just raise up. That is a sign of that can be a sign of clairsentience, where you're able to sense energy where there's no physical evidence of this energy in front of you.
Now explain that last one again, because that's an important one.
Right.
The term, because the sense, the feel, the sense, that's an important one, because sometimes I think people misgauge that. Or let me rephrase, because this comes up a lot when we do these videos and classes about getting results and how you tap in. Explain that aspect again, and the importance of it, because as you said, if you get that connection, somebody walks by, you can actually sense, that's just one example. It could be done in ritual work too. Explain the importance. Does that happen a lot? Is the question number one, as far as in your work, and explain to people the importance of that. That's important. I want you to just run through that again.
Now, our bodies are powerhouses. Like we have the ability to sense things that we cannot physically see. The reason for this is because our brain is hardwired to sense danger that we can't see. So let's say you're a caveman thousands of years ago and a tiger is behind you. Like you need to know that something is there that's gonna eat your ass in like 2 seconds, right? So now that we're not living in the jungle with tigers anymore, that ability is still there. And as we've grown to be able to work with spirits and understand subtle energy, you can use that ability to sense what is in the room around you, who is in the room around you, what type of energy, the quality of the energy, the quantity of the energy, if you so desire.
Right.
So I love that you're stressing the importance of this, because mid-ritual is when, for me, this is most important, right?
Okay.
Let's say let's say Lucifer, for example.
Okay.
Right? Like let's say you're summoning Lucifer and you you're not using candles, you're not using anything sight related. You need to know when the energy in the room has shifted, so that you're able to know that he's there, first of all.
Right.
Second of all, and this is for evocation work. Invocation, similar concept, but obviously that's inside of you.
Correct.
Right? But evocation purposes, you need to understand when the energy is shift so you can stop, trying to be like, come down, come visit me now, type crazy vibes. And just start, the rest of the ritual that you're doing.
Right. Now, I always ask people this because it's interesting, especially first time on the show. What are some of the books and authors that were influential in your path? Name some of the authors and books that were heavy influence on you. Start with some of the, because I know you mentioned some of the Hindu or some of the Buddha, the Hindu practices. Start there, and then kind of share with us some other influences that came as you started to explore the path.
I want to give this book about Ganesh, but I'm unsure of the title right now. It's something that I found on Scribed, and it's a book that walks through all of the different forms of Ganesh. I would highly recommend that for anyone who's interested. But one author in particular who's been helpful is a lady called Cindy Dale, and she is all about Reiki, energy work, but I will specifically recommend her book on energetic boundaries.
Okay.
And the reason for that is it's important. Taking care of ourselves, all of that is linked back to how we experience this world. Another book I would recommend where I, solidified the water thing for me are two books, actually. There's one called Blessed Water by Ars Aurora, and the other one called Connecting with Your Ancestors. I have to get the author for that one as well. But it's a purple book if you want to go look it up.
Okay.
Boy, you asked me to go through my whole library.
No. Just you don't got to go through the whole thing. Just some like key ones. All right. What about
right now?
So, yeah.
I'm reading obviously Asenath Mason. Time, the Temple of Ascending Flame, the Draconian Ritual book.
Okay.
I love Baal Kadmon also. I must say, I love the way he goes through historical references and language.
One thing, I've had Bao on the show a couple of times. One thing I like about Bao Cadman, I've always said this, and I say this in the most respectful way. He has the gift of writing things, not that his work is simplified because you get tremendous results from it, but one gift I feel he has in his books, his method of the way he writes, it's very simple, easy to follow. And the ritual work he puts in his books are very effective. And it's like the Kali Mantra Magic book is a book. It's a book I've been referring people to for years. And I use that as an example. The work in there he has created for Kali is not complicated as far as the setup and how to do it. But if you really focus on how he's laid it out and what he's saying in there, it's a very powerful book with a lot of work. So it's interesting you mentioned Bao Cadman, but go ahead.
My favorite one by him is the one about Tiamat.
Yes,
that was my favorite. Boy, there's plenty. One person that has also been super influential for me in the energy work realm is Jareth Tempest. That's where I buy all my attunements from. But I liked his work, especially with the Angels of Omnipotence. I know this is left hand, but what I like specifically about these angels is that they don't care. They just do not care.
That's true.
Wow, there's so many. I could go on and on and on and on and on. But those are the ones that are coming to mind right now to mention.
Okay, cool. There's a question here from Jack. If I see some questions pop up, I'm just going to throw them at you. But this is from Jack. What's going on, Jack? I was talking to Jack the other night. What techniques on the left-hand path? Is a two-part question. So let's do the first one. Jack's question is, what techniques on the left-hand path have increased your power exceptionally? Let's start with that, and then I'll give you the second one.
I'm so glad you asked. Okay, right. So one, I remember specifically when I started working with demons in particular, I came across this ritual called Ritual to Wield Power by Damon Brand, I think it was. And path working was the second thing I tried with this book by Theodore Rose called Lucifer and the Hidden Demons. So those two really, opened my eyes, because I was like, whoa, I can actually feel and see and understand this energy now. I can't be stopped. And then I discovered energy work. And that really was like, whoa. So this is what it feels like to, be able to just walk around and impact reality, my own reality. And I'm like, whoa, this is cool.
Okay.
I'm making light of it in a way, but it's very serious stuff.
Yes. Yes.
It is extremely powerful, and I would not ever recommend anyone to just pick up energy work just like that and just start, using it.
No,
There's
true.
responsibility that comes with it, and there is, karma that comes with it as well. For example, when you do, let's say I'm doing a Reiki session for someone, whatever I heal in that person, I will also experience that healing on a level for myself.
Yeah.
Because the energy is not just, la la floating around in vibes. It is physically passing through you into that person.
Exactly.
So you're gonna catch that work too. So, that is that is
True
that.
indeed. Yes. No, that's a good point. Hey, what's going on, Angel? We got a shout out, Angel, passing through. I got to give you a buzz, bro. I'm going to get to Jack's second part of his question. Then there's another question by Swatch. I see your question. I'm going to fold that over in a second. Yeah, just keep them coming, and I'll go back up to the top to see if I missed anything. But I want to, before I go to Jack's second part of his question, working with the energy. I know in the beginning we talked about Kundalini, and you said something that I've been saying, I say to people all the time. Sometimes this more so than newcomers. Sometimes people get right on the path and they don't understand. We use that term a lot. You see it, many people that are on this path. We throw the word around, but I don't think sometimes people understand the extent, like you just described, energy, right? You got to be careful messing with certain things because, yes, it does carry an energy, and energy obviously is going to affect everybody differently. And it could affect you mentally, it could affect you emotionally, spiritually, and physically, right? We can't negate the fact there is physical effects to some of this work. And we talk about it all the time on this channel. Did you have a specific experience? Because you mentioned in the beginning when you first came on, you mentioned Kundalini. Kundalini, as we know, is a very powerful form of spiritual energy. Did you have, because you didn't, I mean, again, you don't have to elaborate in detail. Was there something that was a breaking point to that happened out the gate that was like, oh man, I better slow down, or maybe I need to fall back, revisit this? Was there an experience that led you to that? Because it sounds like from what you just said now, you're speaking from some incidents that probably have transpired in the past, if you could share.
Boy, I think it did a lot more than I realized at the time. And
Okay.
for probably a couple of years after that, it's very potent energy. And when I did what I did, which was very stupid, I would not recommend anyone. I wouldn't even explain what I did. That's how dumb it was, right?
I got you. Okay.
Basically, what started happening to me was I started feeling like I was on fire. My whole body felt like I was literally in flames. It was a very physically painful experience. Now, these love and light people will have you out here believing that, oh, it's all, good, and you'll have this big, orgasmic, life-changing, welcoming, warming experience. Okay, sure. You'll have that at first. But what about the next 4 hours after that? And what about the day after that? And the day after that, too?
Gotcha.
So for 3 days, I was in my room, and I couldn't leave the house. I was only, allowed outside with an umbrella because I had raised too much energy in my body at once. And people hear energy and they're like, oh, wee woo, it's not actually real. But people don't realize we actually have electricity running through us 24 hours a day. As long as we are alive, our nervous system runs on electricity. Our heart runs on electricity.
Correct.
Everything pumping through your body is moving simply because you have, electricity. So when you raise your Kundalini, you're not playing with, something that you
right.
that's not going to affect you. I was in there. And if I didn't, have the spiritual teacher, if I didn't reach out to the person who was teaching me at the time and be like, I fucked up. I fucked up real bad.
Oh, yeah.
I could have gone to the hospital. I could have been dead. It's just that serious of an energy that you don't play with that. You can overheat. I went into a fever state. You can have seriously bad delusions, delirium. I was talking to a person the other day, and I was trying to explain to them, that they needed grounding so badly, so badly, because people are out here, especially in the last 3 years that I've seen, you know, having these spiritually psychotic breaks because I wouldn't say fully because, but definitely a big reason because they were doing too much at one time with no guidance. And so that's what happened to me. I almost ended up in the hospital because I was being done.
Wow, I didn't know it was that serious. But
It was that serious.
That's pretty serious. And I'm glad you're sharing because I always try to explain to people both sides of this path. And again, I never shy away. There definitely are some precautions. I don't like to use, you got to be careful. You can use the word dangers, but sometimes that can get a little spooky. But there are things you do need to be conscious and aware of. I'm glad you're sharing this because I talk about it a lot. I've had some experience to certain levels, maybe not to the extent of that level that you just described, but there are people who have described things to the intensity that you've described. And I'm glad you're sharing that because now we have somebody here that's actually living testimony and proof of that, right? So for those listening, right, when you hear me saying, do your due diligence, do your research, don't just jump into things blindly. Don't just I'm not educated, but I'm just going to jump into some deep, dark, intense, powerful work. Well, there you go. You got to be careful. Right?
And some people do not come back from that experience. I was very fortunate. Some people lose their minds, lose their lives. It is an extremely dangerous practice. Summoning also energies without knowing what you're doing is also very dangerous. And something stupid that I did before as well. You need to know what you're doing. You need to know how you're doing it, because just because you can't see it doesn't mean it won't have an effect on you.
Right. 100% agree. All right. The second part of Jack's question piggybacks off the first one. So the techniques and the practices that you've used on your path, his second part of the question is, how did you notice or how did it change or how did you notice it in your daily life? I know you kind of elaborated a little earlier in the very beginning. So what changes did you start to see, or when did you start to notice like, yeah, man, things is trending right, what I'm doing, etc.?
Well, my life has been very turbulent, I will say. But what changed for me, especially in the last 4 years, has been not only a sense of power, but an active reduction in the turbulence. So coming from a chaotic background, like I started to describe earlier, Pentecostal, weird Caribbean life, the whole 12 yards, right? I calmed down and I was able to, I want to paint this picture in a really cool way. But like if you see a spider with a bunch of hands everywhere, it's almost like you just reach out and touch your life in all the places where you couldn't see to touch before. And it's cool to be able to manifest faster, to be able to see things happen faster in my life, to have a smoother way of life, to have that deep sense, that I am at peace, that everything is okay, even in the midst of a chaotic situation. I'm trying to find the best way to describe it. Probably the best effects that I have received as a result of this practice is a deeper appreciation for life itself. Being able to see and experience the beauty of life, not just from the physical end, but from the subtle end as well. And that gives you a sense of power where you don't feel like you can't change your life. You don't feel as though you're at the mercy of whatever the system gives you, where you actively make changes in your life that make things better for you. I'm not saying that you're not going to make mistakes, because I still definitely do. but it gives you power to rectify those mistakes faster, as opposed to not having that awareness, not having that power to do so.
Right. So it sounds like to me, and it makes sense. You can't really pinpoint it, obviously, to a specific thing or things. It's kind of seems like it's an overall, right? You got to look at all the facets of how things are changing in your life, right?
Yeah, because I think people look at magic and they're like, this is a prosperity card. Like, this activates my prosperity trap card. I'm now $10 billion richer.
No, that's not how it works. But yeah, no.
Billions of dollars are I wouldn't say hard to make, but it takes time and it takes work. If that's what you're after on your magical path, by all means. But just know you still live in a physical world. So you still gonna have to put in that time and that effort. Right?
Right. And I was telling, yeah, I'm sorry, I mean to cut you off. I was telling people before I came on, one of the goals that we all have to master on this path is creating that harmony between the objective realm or objective consciousness and the subjective, right? Everything can't be spooky and spiritual. And like you say, it's not like, I'm glad you bring that up, because unfortunately some people come on this path and like you say, they think it turns their prosperity thing on and they're just going to become, it's fucking comical. It's just, it unfortunately exists. But you have to have that, you can use the word balance, the word harmony. You have to have that balance and that harmony between, that's very loud. So you stay grounded is what I'm trying to say, because one thing I see on this path, some people can go to what I call space cadetville. You know, everything is subjective and everything is spiritual. And I keep telling people the reality is you still got to pay your bills. You still got to live your life. You still got to do things on the mundane realm in addition to maintaining your spiritual path, right? So I'm glad that you shared it. But go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I know, I'm glad that you said all that stuff, because I think people miss the fact that even though they are two separate things, they do also connect, right? Like, this is why people, do money magic and wealth magic and all these other different things, right? Because it does connect, but we also need to understand, like, we can't, I wouldn't say there are things we can't do, but we can't expect physical change from subtle work only, So you can throw as much money magic and as much wealth magic out there down the tube as much as you want. But if your actions are not in alignment with what you're sending out there, you're working actively against yourself, And I think that's what a lot of people miss. Now, money magic has worked for me in the past, and so has wealth magic.
Me too. Yep.
But like, that is not the focus of my practice anymore. And I think it says a lot about my personal growth that I was able to take my eyes off the system and the bad vibes and the money trap.
Right.
Just to 100%. See that even though they are separate, they do connect. Like, if money is the most important thing in your life right now, not only question how to get more money, but why. Why is it like that? True indeed. That's the better question to ask. Right. Because you could be fighting something or manifesting money into a hole and you don't even know. You don't even know.
100%. And that's why I tell people, if you're working on that first principle, knowledge of self, taking care of yourself, you start to find out, a lot of those doors start to open for you, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. 100%. Road opening. Now that you mention that, is a super important part of any type of magic. You clear the way, that initial cleanse, you might find out, oh my gosh, this is what has been in my way the whole time. But you wouldn't have known that if you didn't.
Yes, 100%. So yes, I'm glad you shared that. All right, so hopefully that answers your question, Jack. There was another question here from the Swaj. How has walking, because you mentioned earlier you do have some experience on the Hindu path. A question was, how was walking the Hindu path working with inner peace? How has it helped you work on the left-hand path? Like, what experiences did you take from that, and how has it helped you on the left-hand path?
I have one word for that, and that's Kali. Log. Kali. Log. She, boy.
She embodies all that, but go ahead.
Even saying her name is a power in of itself, honestly. Right. Because working with her in particular, specifically, as opposed to working with a male deity, especially a deity like Shiva. I feel like compelled to mention him for certain reason, but working with her in particular has shown me stop letting people play with me. Period. Don't let people play with me. Stand up for myself, live in my power instead of letting people play with me. She has taken me on several journeys,
Right.
not all of which have been pleasant. Let me tell you. She has showed me my own bullshit. She has showed me, my own power, and she has helped me to. Boy, she's helped me through a lot of things in my life. This tattoo on the back of my neck is actually a dedication to her, because she has been that strong of a force in my life, teaching me all these lessons and just helping me to see deeper, not just into the light aspect of myself, but look at the shadow. She doesn't mince words when it comes to me, especially not like during clear audience sessions or I have a whole Kali deck over there,
Right. And I'm glad everything you described, I'm glad because I talk about it all the time. Forces, you hear people talk about Kali, a lot of it's bullshit. So what I'm hearing is everything that's attributed to Kali. Breaking things down, giving a lot of self-realization, removing things and destroying things that need to be removed, replacing them through the awareness that you gain with what needs to be, replaced and put there. Because unfortunately, and again, it's not just the females, it's the males. Everything is always sexual energy with Kali. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist. Yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, right? But it's a problem for me when that's all the person's talking about. That's a problem for me. Because then I'm wondering what kind of experiences are you really having? Are they self-created in the sense that you're, creating something that's not there? But no, and again, it doesn't negate. There's heavy sexual intense energy with Kali. I'm not saying there's not, but I heard you describe a lot of the core things that are connected with, with Kali that are critical, that are important. So I don't know.
When I looked for her, I wasn't looking for anything sexual at all.
Right.
When I look for any god or goddess or deity at all, I'm not looking for any sort of. I can do that on my own. Like, let's be real. Any woman out here in these streets, if you're struggling for sex, you could literally go outside for 5 seconds and find it. You'll be fine.
Exactly. Exactly.
For her, I took a risk working with her because at the time when I found out about her, I had just stumbled into Hinduism, and I was a very, very, very spiritual baby, right? And I asked her for change. That's the only thing I asked her for. I wasn't specific. I didn't ask her for nothing.
Right.
And I didn't know at the time, all of what she was capable of doing. I only knew that she was a goddess of chaos and a goddess of change. Boy, she fucked my life right up. I got in a car accident. I lost everything I had at that time. Everything gone. And she was like, start over, bitch. Start over. You asked for change. You need to change anyway, so might as well just start over. So that's the kind of change that Kali can bring. That's the type of change that working with any draconic or dragon entity can bring to your life. I did some work with Asmodeus to quit drinking last year. And he let me get to the bottom of the bottle before, I was like, wow, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying now, So these entities who are intense, who carry this powerful sexual energy, don't play with them.
Right.
They're not to be trifled with. They can and will mess you up if you fuck around and find out.
Oh yeah, and and again, that's always reiterated because we're trying to give people the guidance. We don't want. I don't want to see people go through that. But you said something earlier that's real, and I've experienced that. Fortunately, it was just a small amount of people that I've known. I've experienced that with two people, like you say. Sometimes people don't come back from it, you know, and that's a reality. It exists. It's fucked up because I have seen the ugly side of it. And it's not pretty. And so those aren't just words to be saying. It's like, you know, a lot of us say that, you know, don't fuck around with it. You know, it's nothing to play with. We're not just saying that, right? Those aren't just words. We're saying that because we've seen it, we've witnessed it, and we've experienced it. Just like some of you guys watching, I'm sure can make that same statement. But to maybe newer people, I just want to pause there for a minute. Maybe newer people on this path, if you're somebody new and you're just venturing out, take those words wisely, right? Don't just take it as, oh, why do they keep saying that? Why do I hear Baniti say that all the time? Why does it sound like he's preachy? And no, it's not being said for that reason. We're saying that because we've seen it. And I wouldn't wish some of the stuff I've seen, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But go ahead.
No, I would piggyback off what you said. It's not a preachy thing. It's a warning. Like
Right.
even medicines, medications, which this all is, right? Spirituality is our medicine. It helps us heal. It helps us to become better and be more of who we are. Even a regular everyday medicine has a warning on the label. You know, everything is not for everyone. I wouldn't run around recommending this path to anyone. You got to find this for yourself. And if you decide that you're ready for that, you know,
Correct.
still move with wisdom and caution and move with faith, but also common sense, you know.
Right. 100%, man. I appreciate you sharing that. All right, so I got some more questions, but there's a comment here I got to read from Blade of Ashtar. Nah, it's definitely because I agree with it. You know, we were touching on something earlier, so definitely wish the New Ages would stop mixing their spiritual vomit with the occult work. All they accomplish now is misleading people into work they're not ready for. 100%. And look, I'm not knocking nobody's hustle. The problem is, and part of the problem, I just have to address this because it's just something that stands out. So give me a minute to do this, and if there's something you want to add to it, please feel free. This is a huge issue because, you know, now with the various social media platforms, there's just a wide platform now to accomplish this, unfortunately. A lot of that stuff didn't go on, you know, back in the day when a lot of these, you know, classes and workshops and things weren't done via the internet, social media. There wasn't these, you know, YouTube. I mean, you had to stand on your own and it was face to face. So I always say this, people wouldn't dare do, talk, or say 90% of the shit they say if they were standing in front of you. That's just fact. Because they wouldn't be able to get away with it. They would be put on the spot. Now, unfortunately, the bad thing about social media, these platforms, the internet and the computer, I call these people hide behind the keyboard nowadays. So there's ways to dance around it. They can spit that vomit as you're talking. And you know, again, I don't point fingers, but there are a lot of platforms out there doing what Blade of Ashtar is talking about. They're mixing the New Age with Rishi/Santeria, with Left Hand Path Occult. And I don't know what to make of it or what to call it other than pure confusion or vomit, right? And again, it's not to knock anybody, but this channel, we deal, and the perspective I'm coming from, we're dealing with straight occult left-hand path work. Now, people have different methods of doing that, right? But when it's that method there, it can be very toxic. All right. So I'm glad you put that in. I don't know if something you wanted to add to that before we go to the next question.
I will say something that I think people need to pay a lot more attention to. I'll say this, my day job is in technology, right? And over the last 10 years, I've held a career in technology and I've watched it evolve from what was supposed to be a fad into a living, walking, breathing social experiment. That's what this is. We don't have any historical evidence for this being a functional good thing for humanity. And by this, I mean social media at large, right? We don't know this. This is new. And you have people out here who build algorithms, and the algorithm itself is an experiment. These algorithms are designed to manipulate people. So you could be seeing things that you feel is meant for you simply because the algorithm decided that it was.
Right.
And it's being conscious of that every day that really helps me stay the hell off social media for the most part.
No, I agree. I agree.
Because it's a lot. It's an infinite amount of information out there everywhere, not just
Mhm.
social media, but on regular blogs and stuff like that. And we as a society should not be relying on this thing because it is experimental in nature. We don't know the full extent of what it's capable of doing to humanity. We only know now that it allows people to hide in plain sight. You could be anyone online. You
True.
could be anyone. You could say anything. You could do what you want. And who's gonna really stop you unless you get reported or something? But even then, like, the damage has already been done.
Yes.
Social media has dehumanized a lot of people. It has allowed people to dehumanize people. And this is why we have cancel culture. Because
Yes.
people are no longer seen as especially celebrities are not being seen as human anymore, just sources of entertainment. And that's not a healthy way to look at any human being, no matter how distant or close they are to you.
Correct.
So when these spiritual influencers and stuff started getting online, no one caught on to the hype. I wouldn't say no one. People who are new to spirituality would not have caught on to the hype because, well, would have caught on to the hype because it was tantalizing. It was new. It was
Correct.
something that no one had seen before.
That's correct.
Now, hopefully, that the fallout is coming down. People are using more discernment
Right.
because anyone can say anything, be anything online. Next thing you know, you're out 100 grand to this person who's supposed to be a
Mm.
coach to you and who's now led you straight to hell.
Right. Right.
And not the good kind of hell either. Just saying, just like it's
And,
dangerous and it
no,
has real life consequences. So I agree with you
100%.
completely.
Yep. I agree. I think kind of this piggyback segues into the next question. It kind of gives partially the answer. So
Mm.
there's another question from you, Swaj. What is your thoughts on the Kundalini, like people on the internet that are offering like these weekend packages and things of that nature? I think you kind of just touched on it and answered it with, to me, I'm just going to add this and I'm going to let you, give your perspective on it. But I just wanted to say something that I think what you just said a minute ago, Jasper, is important. You got to be careful. There's a lot of scammers, a lot of hustlers. There's no for sure way of knowing unless you have a way of validating the person's credentials, especially over the internet. I don't think there's any 100% foolproof way. If somebody's offering some type of package, whether it's for Kundalini, this or that, you can't, unless you have a way of going into personally your spirit and tapping in, and sometimes people just get a clear insight or intuition, or they get a vibe that it's right. That's a different thing. But um even that, you have to be careful. But I don't think there's any 100% foolproof way. My opinion, I think probably more than 70 to 80% of it's bullshit. I leave that window open because there are some good people out there that do know what they're doing. Unfortunately, it makes it tough for people to break through, the people who are genuine, that are really doing the work and really have something to offer. So I always want to leave that window open. I do believe it also exists on that side too. So just your thoughts on that.
Mm. Wow. Okay. This is a series of questions. I'm trying to put together all the information in my head.
Take your time. Take your time.
For the Kundalini workshops, now, like I said, my experience was rough when I did something very dumb. I think it's that what you just ran over just now is the most important thing you can do because that's your first line of defense. Your discernment, your intuition.
Hmm.
Before you do anything in magic, and I mean literally anything, before you cleanse a room good, you need your intuition. That is the strongest magical muscle, or even life muscle, I believe, that you can have because
Right.
it will save your life. Sometimes we take that for granted. We think, oh, that's just me, being anxious, or that's just me being afraid. But why are you afraid? Why you feel scared? Is it
Right.
literally you being afraid of the experience, or is it your body trying to tell you that something is
100%.
Because some of these people will literally have you out here in the jungle. Next thing you know, you wake up in the hospital. Don't do it to yourself.
Shit.
Don't do it to yourself.
Hey, look, that's why we say, man, and that's why I've been saying for years, there's predators and there's prey. And look, it's fucked up. I'm not saying it's right, but it's just, that's the existence we live in.
I mean, what's the difference between a televangelist and a person selling you a $20,000 Kundalini weekend? If you can't tell the difference,
it's a problem.
It's a serious issue.
It's a problem. All right, we got a couple more good questions. Oh, Sherry is in the building. I see your question, Sherry. I'm gonna get you next, right after this one. Jack has another question here. I think you kind of answered this, but again, what is your favorite element to work with or feel you have the most connection to spiritually?
Fire. Period. Fire.
So elaborate.
Elaborate. I love fire. I have always loved fire. My chart, if you are interested in astrology, is obviously full of fire everywhere. Right. I started my practice not too long ago with the sun, and I have been loving it. And I didn't realize how much I loved fire until I started using candle magic. Well, I love missing candles and burning herbs, all that stuff. I love all the elements though, but my favorite one is fire. I love water too. Fire.
Okay. All right, so that answers that question. All right, so this one's from that's good. This one's from Sherry. Question is, you did actually answer this earlier, but cover it again. It's important because it's what the YouTube channel is. Your YouTube channel is based on. She did get here a little late. She says, so not sure if this was covered, but since I found you from your end chant songs, could you talk about what ends are and their purpose?
Yeah, let's get a bit deeper into that. So like we discussed, we were talking about the importance of sound and how sound is a direct energetic connection between you and the deity you're trying to connect to, right? Like I said, I learned about mantras from Hinduism. So like I listen to mantras every day, and they helped me to change not only my mental reality, but my physical reality as well. Because sound itself is a physical energy. We don't realize that, but it is. Like I was mentioning earlier too, like I have very strong clairaudience. So like I will hear, messages. Like and I use tarot to strengthen that ability as well. But why I did these mantras was to form that physical connection with these deities. There was no music out there for these chants, for these ends. They were all just raw, almost like Gregorian chants. Like no hate to these people. Like they did a good job. I'm not gonna lie, because it's not easy to record all of the ones that they did. So I do appreciate their work. But the music itself is just something more meditative about it, more trance-like about it. And this is what mantras are for, to get still. And even if you play it on low in the background, to just listen and connect with the energy, to notice the shift in the environment that it makes when you do connect to this energy. For each one of these ends that I do, I have my own ritual that I do to make sure that I am directly connected to, whoever it is. And I do my due diligence and research to at least have an understanding of this deity and how they operate, what they feel like, what they're capable of doing, the type of, devotees they may have. Some people are heavy on Ancestral, some people are heavy on Haman. You've got to show the same amount of respect to each deity. You can't just, I choose not to see them as lesser in any way,
Right.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
No, that's good. No, because again, that was something we did touch a little bit about that earlier. That's an important question. I just want to add a little something to that. I'm huge on sound, right? Vibration, frequency, right? We use mantras and chanting, even in the form of N work that you do in your music, to me is huge in ritual work. I use it. I'm going to say, man, pretty much majority of my work, a large percentage of it. And when we do the group rituals here on Patreon, those that participate in those rituals know we also use that, a wide across the board, because if you understand how alchemy works, this is a very important thing to understand with mantras and chanting and sound and vibration and frequency, right? When you hear the alchemists say one must make themselves less dense, it's by altering your vibrational frequency or your spiritual frequency. And when one has the ability and is able to do that consistently, this is when more spiritual experiences start to happen to the individual, whether that's could be transcendental meditation, out of body experiences, astral travel. It can also, on a very intense level, enhance your dreams and your dream work, path working. It does increase your visualization skills. And as I've been telling people for years now on Patreon in the classes, to be very effective in your magic and your ritual, the importance of science of breath, and our class we're covering on a 22nd Kundalini meditation and yoga awakening class, we show you the importance of science of breath, the importance of focus and concentration, which you can't obtain proper meditation until you have the focus and the concentration part down, and definitely working on your visualization skills, because especially black magic, you're doing a magical work, and one of your most powerful tools, the most powerful tool, is the power to visualize, right? So that is critical. What you're saying there is critical. And that's why, like, the ends and like the things you have on your channel, for an example, or people that use ends or meditations or mantras or chanting, you can focus in not just on the word, but you could focus in on the sound, and the vibration of the word is actually what opens the individual up. And this is why I've explained to people over the years, the English language being such a very new language, the baby language on the planet Earth. If you notice, when you look at any language, whether it could be, you could trace it back from other ethnicities, it could be Spanish, it could be Old Latin, back to Aramaic, back to Hebrew, Arabic. All of those more older languages have different tones and frequencies to them when you listen to them spoke. English does not. It's a very bland language that doesn't have a lot of tones or vibrations or frequencies. And how you can confirm this is, if you've ever done, we all have on this path, but if you've never have done, say, a mantra or a chant in Old Latin or Aramaic, Hebrew, or Arabic, do it, and then compare it to when you do it in the English, and you'll see it has two totally different effects. Two totally different effects.
Yeah, because the vibrations of the words are different. Your intention behind it could be the same, but one carries more weight than the other because of the quality of the word itself. Like, how do I say it? Like, it's like if you're saying the word soul in English versus alma in Spanish. Those are two words that mean the same thing, but they both feel different. Even for whole entire languages, you learn to speak one language and it feels totally different from the other language that you know. It's bizarre, but it's true. And with Hindu being one of the oldest, or Hindi being one of the oldest languages on the planet that we currently have, you know, that and any language that has that sort of age, will feel different than English, because English is like a baby.
100%. 100%. That's a good. Well, here's something else. You touched on this. I got to forward this one over to you too. But yeah, sound, vibration, frequency. I can't negate. I talk about that all the time. I can't negate the importance of that. Now, I've always said this too to people. It's important. For an example, people get books, right? They'll see rituals, and they'll try to reenact word verbatim what's there in the ritual, and they'll go through it and, you know, how it's written there. I tell people some of these books, some of the grimoires will have the pronunciation sometimes, like for example, like Asenath Mason will have it in some of her books. You can look at it also. Don Webb will have it in some of his books. I'm just throwing some examples out there. I always tell people, learn it in the English first, because obviously you want to know what it means. It needs to be stamped in your head, because obviously don't just go like, say, because some of these grimoires will have the stuff in the Old Latin. And I love to do the stuff in the Old Latin. But don't just go right there and do it in that, but you don't know what it means or you don't know what it says. You don't necessarily have to be a full linguistic who can translate it, but you do need to know what it means, because what that does is screw up your intent, because then your intent is out of whack because you don't really know what you're doing, right? You don't really have energy and focus towards what you're doing. But I do encourage people, when you get to a point on your path or your journey, you should learn some of this in those tones and frequencies of those language, because I'm telling you this, you'll experience it. You know, you just said it. It's a totally different experience. I can't describe it, you know, in exact words, but I just wanted to throw that in there.
I know, right? It's one of those almost unknowable things. It's almost one of those experiential things. But if you're a person, like if you've ever used Enochian before, for example, like even speaking some of the deities' names out loud, because they are so old, you know, and so empowered, you know, they have a different feeling to them altogether.
Right, 100%. All right, this question is from Sherry. All right, I think you might have touched a little bit on this, but again, keep in mind, Sherry came late, but we're going to let Sherry slide. Sherry can come late, she could do that. Do you feel if you had been more specific with Callie that the results would have been the same or not as severe? So actually, no, this was something you were saying earlier. So she's asking you to expound a little more. So again, let me read it again, just so there's no confusion. Do you feel if you have been more specific with Callie that the results would have been the same or not as severe, is the question.
Definitely less severe, because for those people who weren't tuned in earlier, I said that I asked Kali for one thing, and I said I want change. I was not specific, like a clown. I was like, change my life. She fucked my life right up, it ended up good, and it was for a good reason. I really needed it. I was a different person back then. I was saying I was not a nice person,
right?
And I did need to change how I was living my life.
Now, did you not read the introduction to Bao's book? There's that.
At the time, no.
He warns. He tells you in there.
That's why I tell everyone too. Like, hey, watch
the change. No. But the change. Yes. And that is the number one word I always point out to people with Kali. And you said some intense shit earlier. Car accidents. I've heard people say that. I've heard people say they lost their job. Their career path changed completely.
I lost my job. I lost my apartment. I got into a near-death car accident. There's a lot of things that happened to me back then at that time that I didn't connect to her. But it was only in hindsight that I realized, wow, I asked this goddess for change. And she not only showed up, but she freaked out. She just went, and she's like, all right, level this shit. You're done. Time to start over. Just start over. And if I hadn't have done that, I don't think that I would be who I am right
now. Now let me ask you a question. Because when I hear stories like this, and from my own experience, right? When you sit back and reflect on that, right? Do you look at all of that destruction and things that needed to be destroyed, because you mentioned road clearing? Do you feel, did you ever look at it in the perspective like all that needed to be destroyed in order to make way, a clear path for things that really needed to be built and replaced there? Because sometimes people look, because you hear that, right? And you go, oh man, that sounds, maybe somebody could be watching or listening, a new person, or somebody sees the recording of this later. you know, you can go, man, that shit sounds horrific. Who the fuck would want to, you know, because I hear people say this, new people, like, why would you guys want to willingly tap into that? You know, we hear this shit all the time, all of us. When you look back and reflect, did you look at it like, no matter how, and that's intense, no matter how crazy the experience you went through, when you look back now and reflect on it, did you look at it in that perspective, or did you get a different message from it, is what I'm asking.
Now, there are several messages that have stuck with me from that experience. The first one is that destruction is just the other side of creation. When you destroy, when you eradicate, when you remove something completely, there is now space. And in that space, you can make something new, which is what I did. I made a completely new life, which was necessary. The other message is, don't be foolish, be wise. And the third message I got from it was to understand your power. Just understand. Because if you can understand the power that you have, she didn't have to listen to a damn thing I said. She didn't have to do nothing. She could have just ignored me and just walked all along.
Sure.
But the fact that she even bothered to show up as a primordial force and do what she does, and not only do it, but like use it to show me the lesson. I'm trying to say, like, I'm an animist, so I believe that these deities have personality, have, you know, inherent consciousness. She didn't have to do that. She could have just left me like a clown, continue, you know, doing foolishness until I ran up into the wrong person or the wrong energy.
Right.
I feel like what she did for me was a mercy.
100%. Gotcha.
And I look at it now in a way that if I had not had that experience, and I walked into, let's say, Leviathan, for example, with that attitude that I had,
Right.
I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be nice and under the sea. I wouldn't be sitting here at all.
It's crazy. I'm glad you shared that. That's that right there. I say that's powerful stuff, because that's breaking it down as real as you can get. And again, it's good to hear this, because, and again, it's not to judge or knock anybody. And it's just, this is what this path is about. And this is what I mean when I say, look, you literally come on this path. Now, some may not know it at first. I just want to be clear on that. You're literally voluntarily saying, here I am, you know, go to work on me. Do it. Because like you said, when you approach Kali, and I'll use something basic like in Bal Cadman's book, he says, look, be careful when you approach the dark goddess. Be careful when you ask for change, because she can bring it in very intense waves. Now, if you're not, you mentioned something earlier, if you're not specific, for an example, people might go to Kali and say, oh, you know, my life is not in order. I need better change financially or in my living situation. Not taking into account, you could have a lazy ass spouse, male or female, in your life, and maybe you're just in denial. And Kali says, well, that's part of your problem that's weighing you down, but I'm going to help you see it. And she might cause a disruption in the relationship, a separation. Or you might not realize you become complacent at a job, and she's saying that's part of the reason why you're struggling financially, because you're complacent and you've accepted your circumstances. So I'm going to make you lose that job so other doors and paths are open. I'm just giving an example. That's what I mean too. And that's why Bal Cadman has that in his book, and others that really have the experience with Kali, and yourself as you're sharing with us now. It's no joke. Change, man. When you go to any archetype or deity, spirit, goddess, demon like that, you must be ready to embrace the change, regardless of what it is. And here's the thing that people fuck up, and tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe you had this experience. Did you have a preconceived notion of change? Like you tried to map it out in your mind? Like,
oh, yeah.
That's the worst thing you could do, period.
It wasn't nothing like that at all.
Talk a little bit about that.
So my idea was like, I just want to change. Like I was struggling at the time with depression that I didn't know what it was at the time. I just thought I was just a sad person. But I wanted change because I was ready to be happy. I was ready to, you know, flaunt all of my things in people's faces and be prideful and just walk down the street and like cut all people off in my life and just I had a horrible attitude towards life then, you know, and I could have blamed it on, you know, where I came from. I could have blamed it on what I experienced. But this experience that I had with Kali made me sit down, shut the hell up, and listen, which was I am part of the problem. It may not be my fault, the things that I went through, but I am the solution. I have to take the responsibility. And if I want all of these things, it's best for me to just be humble about it instead of trying to, you know, run up and down in the streets like a fool showing everyone what I have and then I get robbed and then I be mad and blah, blah, blah. So when I asked her for change, it's almost like she picked me up, shook me. I was like, what the hell is you doing? And put me on the next path entirely.
Yeah.
Because it's like, when I think about who I was then and who I am now, it's
Totally
literal night and day. Like,
Totally different.
I may have been going out more. I may have been more social. I may have been, you know, more apt to be friends with more people. I'm not like that anymore. I'm much more introverted and I'm more selective with who I allow around me, you know.
Right.
And I don't flaunt what I have. I don't want to flaunt what I have. You know, I would rather be at home around, you know, myself and chilling, having some nice food and just enjoying what I have or don't have, you know. I don't think of life in terms of have and don't have. And she was the one who burnt that out of me and got that out of me. Because
100%.
here is a very tempting mentality to judge people based on what they have versus what they don't have.
Yes.
And that's on the whole Western side of the world. You know, we get that from y'all up there in America. That's where we get that from.
Yes.
I actually think that's more of a human thing in general.
Yeah. 100%. Appreciate that.
She roasted that pride out of me, that pridefulness, you know, that sass, the hubris is the perfect word for this.
Yes.
The thought that I could just fly up in anybody's face and, you know, get away with whatever I want. She was
100%.
like, nope, here's a nice brick wall for you. Enjoy.
Exactly. No, that's facts, and I appreciate you sharing that. And no, it's a great you know, thing. Yeah. Severe. I know Sherry used the word severe. That in some aspects that might be being polite, but that definitely glad you shared. So a couple comments I want to read here, which are pretty good. Louis, aka Brother Angel, when we were talking about earlier, people mixing these different systems, and he's dead on. As per the mixes of various practices, aren't some of these different systems incompatible with each other? 100%. And that's my point of why I'm saying you got to be careful when people are mixing this shit and don't really know what they're doing, because when we talk about compatibility, right? You can't take something, and I see people do it all the time. They'll take something in Ifa or Santeria and they'll mix it with some shit they ain't got no business mixing it with. Now, let me just say this. You can do whatever the fuck you want. It's clear.
I mean, you can.
You can. Yeah, I mean, I want to make that clear. There is no written rule.
You can.
You can. You can do whatever you want, whatever you like. I'm not saying that, oh, it's in the manual on page 120, whatever, that you can't do it. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm in alignment with what Louis is saying here. He's 100% right. It's just by energy and by just experience, you just know these things are incompatible with each other. So you do have to be aware of that. Here's a comment, two comments from E Bliss. Good comments. Aries/Sun, Aries Mercury, and Aries Venus here. Hot take: transhumanism is a double-edged sword. This experiment is older than humanity. There will always be people that hold themselves accountable. And we have to, especially on this path, we have to be accountable. And I always tell people, that's one thing when you're linked in on this path, whatever. I mean, there's various different spiritual systems that are part of this path. But one thing that this path will teach you as a whole is accountability.
Yes.
Right? So talk a little bit about that.
There's two things in it's in the way that like transhumanism and accountability go together. Now, I have a very measured view of this from like an economic standpoint, right? Like transhumanism can be dangerous and it can have its benefits,
Mhm.
right? But what we tend not to think about is do the does the danger outweigh the benefits, right?
Right.
So, for example, what an example of transhumanism working, and this is a unfortunate series of events that happened, but back when Venezuela and their dollar was devalued, they were able to gain money by trading coins on real estate. That's doing a human activity, which is working, having a job, and generating funds within the boundaries of virtual world, right? So to me, that's an example of a benefit of transhumanism, being able to utilize an extension of your energy to create some kind of change in the real world, right? And social media does that too, where you're able to run a business online and blah 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 blah. Now the bad side of transhumanism is, let's say today, you know, the dollar becomes worth 1 penny,
Mhm.
and everyone is then required to have a job in said virtual world that shall remain brandless and nameless on the show, right?
Correct.
That is a scary thought to me. And the only way that something like that can be avoided, period, is by two levels of accountability. One, personal accountability. That's paramount.
Correct.
That's just period. Because if you are not accountable to anyone, that is a problem.
Correct.
You need to have a sense of morality and a sense of justice to be able to say something is wrong. Um, and right now, that sense of morality, justice, and neighborly love that we need as people is has been eroded significantly by the distance of social media, the distance of being able to type something to someone, 9,000 miles away. But dang, I can't believe I'm talking about this on an occult show.
Well,
I'm feeling so
there's
bad
nothing
right
we
now.
don't talk about. There's nothing we don't talk
But
about.
like seriously, it is a frightening thought. But the solution is community, and community is what breeds accountability. Even a show like this, where you can voice your thoughts, you can say what you want to say, you can
Correct.
ask deep questions, and know that the person who you're talking to, and someone like you specifically, Beniti, is going to have a logical, measured, thoughtful, and sage response that actually makes sense. It makes a difference. We need community because we need people to judge each other. Contrary to popular belief, we need to judge the foolishness out of our society, and we also need compassion. You know, that's that thing that results from vulnerability. When you're vulnerable, like it started online with like mental health and all that stuff, but before there was even social media, people were compassionate to each other. Your neighbor doesn't have any food, you go next door and you give them a full meal. You know,
Right.
we need more of that now than we did last year because technology is growing too quickly.
Right.
That's just
100%.
the facts.
That says, yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, like you say, there's nothing here we don't cover, though. So we could talk about transhumanism. We could talk about how, I mean, that's what this path is about. And that's the beauty of it because there's no parameters, there's no boundaries, right? There's nothing taboo, there's nothing out of the ordinary, there's nothing bizarre or strange. And I know some of you here personally and others here that I may not know. I know you guys have experienced and have a lot of this stuff on your mind. And you bring up a good point, sense of community and platforms and things that we're doing here uh, help as an outlet for that. So 100% agree with that. Um, Here's an interesting question for you from a Swatch. This is interesting. Have you considered doing covers for some of the metal bands that have great messages for those who live with a calmer spirit? That's interesting.
That is interesting. No, I have not until right now. Hmm. I can actually think of one song that I would love to cover. I'll keep that one inside. Let me think about that some more. Actually, thank you.
Okay, so you might have just sparked a idea. Cool. All right. Here's another comment from Iblis. I look at the Ars Goetia Grimoire and this is a good way to look at it, as a spiritual necromantic technology. They are like circuit boards, good for at least getting some results. Yeah. Again, I always tell people, whatever your method and your perspective at looking at any spiritual system, and you're able to apply it, you're able to take that perspective and you're able to apply it. And the key word there is results. I tell people, because I'll get emails all the time, hey, I did such and such, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Do you think, and they'll tell me all the results they got. And then they go, do you think I did it right? And
you think so? Baby.
Yes. Don't worry about if it's not in alignment with something mainstream or something else anybody's doing. I don't care what it is. If it's giving you some form of results on an astounding level, results across the board, I would always say keep plugging away at it, exploring, experiment. Results is the key. Now, if you're just fucking with shit and you're just doing it to be doing it and nothing's happening, then you're going to have to reevaluate, rethink your positioning on that.
I think we are the magic.
Correct.
Like, if you have 2 sticks and you bang 2 sticks together and be like, okay, rain, come down in 3 days, and it rains in 3 days.
Exactly.
Do it again next time.
Well, hey, you look at the Native Americans. Some tribes have a dance where they create what they call SCWs, which is standing column or waves. We have the ability, either as individuals or in a group, where when we know the wave, how these, because look, we know the planet Earth has over 162 magnetic natural grids that we are able to tap into, right? That we can connect to ourselves. And the Native Americans know how to tap into those grids. And this is where if you look at where some of the mounds are, there's a map that came out years ago to show you what I'm talking about. It's called the I Am America map. Some people might be familiar with it. It was a map that was very big in the 90s, late 90s in the conscious and occult community. And on the I Am America map, you can Google it. It'll come up on Google. It shows you all of the central points of where the most energy of these grids in our country here in the United States is. And you'll see, for an example, there's one between Florida and Georgia. A lot of the areas on the map where a lot of the indigenous Native Americans were. So when you brought to mind this when you said rubbing 2 sticks together and doing a rain dance, because the Native Americans have a dance called the rain dance. And it's a science they perfected through something called creating what they abbreviate as SCW, standard column of waves. And they do a dance. If you ever Google it, Google the rain dance, how these tribes do it, watch their motions and how they build up the frequency. It could literally alter the atmosphere. And it's as crazy as that may sound to some people who may not know, this is why they call it a rain dance, because they had the ability to literally to make it rain. I know that sounds crazy and it's not far-fetched. Google it, research it, and you could, see this stuff for yourself. So why do I bring that up? Because you said we are the magic, right? And that's confirmation how people always talk about the micro and the macrocosm, right? Everybody talks about that in a lot of spiritual systems, the connection with nature and spirituality in correlation to the nature and spirituality that exists in us and how they both piggyback off each other. Well, you could see that in some of those type of practices, especially shamanism, right? So when you said that just came to mind when you made the statement, we are the magic.
Now, I also want to, I was just in Australia for 6 months, right? And I just reached back in January. And what I discovered down there, well, not discovered, but what I learned down there was from a group of, I didn't learn with these people, I learned about them through a book called The Healers of Western Australia. And this book is extremely important because it's a written oral tradition from people who are part of this line of healers called the Gankari. Now, these people were doing herbal healing, energy healing, spiritual, travel, astral projection, all of these things, tens of thousands of years before you and me was even a thought, right? They know how things work. And the stories that they tell, like in any indigenous tradition, like it all comes back to that science, that these things that we are just now learning. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
to me, I think that it is magical in and of itself, because it's like, how could you possibly have the tools to understand this? And then when I think about it deeper and sit with that, I'm like, they didn't need tools. If you could be here and fly to Geneva in the middle of the night, or wherever place you fly to in the middle of the night using astral projection. If you get to go from your room in the middle of the night to, check on someone who you're thinking about in the middle of the night, what do you need all of these extra physical tools for when you have people who are naturally equipped with these tools?
Right.
Because nature gives us everything we need, everything. She think of things and have things just there before we even realize we need them. Like,
Yeah.
how would the earth possibly know that we need plants to heal this, or we need plants to do that? Like,
Mhm.
this is what I love about the
Mhm.
connection between science and magic. It doesn't have to be an opposition. It doesn't have to be a fight, because it works so well together. You know?
Mhm. I mean, one thing what you're saying, I mean, I even look at the basic science that we learn in elementary school. Look at the process of photosynthesis, right? That process is amazing in itself, right? How through the process of how greenery, plants, trees, how they feed off, the sun's energy is food, literally food.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that for a minute. If we understand just the basic process of photosynthesis, now apply that to yourself and your spiritual work, and you kind of make the connection. But yeah, there's a lot to look at here, man. What we do, I think people misinterpret, because I think sometimes I always try to break the stigmata of this path where people think that we're just a bunch of people that walk around wearing black hooded robes saying "Hail Satan." It's fucking comical. Like that's what it's as stupid and dumb as that sounds. There are people here, "Hail Satan, oh, Lucifer," there's people that are so ignorant because they don't take the time to just do a little research. And unfortunately, that's because a lot of the crap that's been built up that's out there over the years. And I get it. But I always have to make that clear. I don't even really like to use that term a lot, because the reality is when you even say the word left-hand path, it kind of boxes you into that stereotype of what they think it is. Because people hear left-hand path, immediately they think Church of Satan, Satan worshipers.
Oh, let me just toss
Yeah,
on my
yeah.
robe
Let me
right
put the
quick.
black hood on, and it's stupidity. I prefer to use terms like the occult, path of self mastery, because we know the word occult just means hidden. I always like to look at that hidden knowledge from us. It's not really hidden, because no knowledge is really hidden. You just got to look for it, right? It's only hidden when you don't know. And this is why I tell people, they think they find, oh, I just learned this new thing. No, you just uncovered a new thing, because it's always been there. It's just new to you. I think you touched on something to that earlier, because you just never heard of it before. That's why it's new. So I try to shift away from those terms and those stereotypes, because just like everything else, it comes with the territory, and we need to address it, because look what we're talking about. That's why I was just saying this. There's no parameters, no boundaries. We deal with a vast level of information, is what I'm trying to say. Everybody has their own perspective and journey. Like, look at you this evening, for an example, the diverse elements and backgrounds and experiences that you come from, and what got you here. And that's the purpose when we bring people on the show. We want people to see, wow, that person came from there. And everybody has there could be some similarities in their journey, but everybody has an interesting story of how they got here. And that's what's unique to me. So I never tell people to negate where you came from. As far as, I don't even care if you was up in the church for 20 years, right? People go, oh, I wish I never wasted all that time. And no, it was for a reason and a purpose. And you came out at the time that you were supposed to come out, right? You don't look at it like that. I keep telling people, I wish I could have, should have, would have, is irrelevant. And this is why when we understand on this path, there's a science of what we call dealing with the now. That's the only thing that's important. It doesn't mean your past doesn't have some type of effect to a certain degree with where you are in the now. But the reality is the only thing that is real is the now, the moment. So what I'm saying is it's important what you're doing now. Don't stress the shoulda, coulda, wouldas of what you weren't doing then, because you can't do nothing about that. That shit is irrelevant. It's a waste of time, you know? So I say that because we're talking about a lot of interesting things here.
Yeah. And what is so powerful about coming back to now is that when you sit in the center of yourself, when you are centered, you start to realize how much of what you went through that you actually needed.
Yes.
You know, it might have been shite. It might have not. It might not have a purpose on its own. It might be something really garbagey that you went through. You know, really difficult, and maybe even shameful and embarrassing. You might have things that you've done in your past, you know, that you're
Right.
not proud of. But like all of these things have created you now. You are who you are
100.
now. And you
100.
get to choose every minute, every second of every day, even when you're having a hard time, you get to choose. What are you going to
100%.
do with that? Are you going to give it a purpose and let it rest, or will you let it control you?
100%. All right, let's take a couple more questions, and then Dragon Jasper. Just let me know if it gets late. You got to go. Just say, hey, you got to wrap it up.
I got to go in 15 minutes. How about that?
Okay, perfect. We'll take 2 more questions. Does that sound good?
Yeah,
And then we'll wrap it
perfect.
up. All right. This is an interesting one here by Gramercy. Grimacy. I'm sorry. Peace and hair grease. Peace and hair grease. Peace, love, and hair
Peace
grease.
and hair grease.
All right. So we're going to take 2 more questions because, yeah, we've been at it here for just over 2 hours now. And I appreciate you spending some time with us and spending time here with the Primordial Chaos family. All right. What's your experience with What's your experience with Tiamat's primordial current, and is there a connection in your terms to Kali?
Well, okay, I am not going to lie to you. I don't have too much experience with Tiamat.
Okay.
The only experience I have with Tiamat thus far on my path is the light touch, and I mean very light touch, that I received by working with her in Balance Book. When I did discover her, that light touch was a lot. I will say it is. She is extremely powerful. But reading her story and reading the story of the creation generation of the world through her current was very powerful for me, and it gave me a new perspective on existence, and it helped me to come to terms with, you know, the fact that not everything in this world is wrong. Maybe it's how it's supposed to be for a reason, so that we can, you know, in Hinduism they call it Maya, so that we can use the Maya for growth, and that's that synthetic system that's not nature. It's built by humans. The illusion of physicality itself. That light touch was enough to send me like on this deep dark hole that took me a while to like it just round from. It didn't spiral me, but I realized the gravity of her energy.
Okay.
And working with Kali is similar, but I would definitely say that Tiamat comes from a totally different place.
Yes.
Totally different energy. It's
Yes.
completely something much deeper, much older.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes, 100% agree. I'll just add this, and that looks like that probably was the last question anyway. Just some comments, but we'll do that at another time, only for time's sake. But just to add the last thing before we wrap it up, I agree with you. Tiamat, I'm going to say this. Tiamat is very violent. When I say violent, she will test she's put my mind in areas, shit I thought I would never think about. I don't want to even probably say it live here on the internet because it might not even sound, you might say that sounds a little bizarre. People have to understand we have to sometimes connect with that aspect, because sometimes, now when I say connect, well, I'll be clear on this. I don't want this to get misinterpreted. I'm not saying carry out anything bizarre, psychotic, or crazy, but you will be tested and taken to that length because you need to understand the origin of those thoughts and where they come from. And people sometimes, that could be a scary thing. It could be a scary place. Let me give you an example. And if you were honest with yourself, all right, I got to be careful how I say this.
Oh boy.
I'll start with something light and something darker. And I don't like to talk about things like this in an open platform. So I'll kind of be discreet to indiscreet, if you understand what I'm saying.
In the spirit of semi-vulnerability.
Yeah.
Wise vulnerability. There you go.
How many of us, for an example, might have been on a cruise or a boat and walked to the edge of a boat and thought, what would it be like to just fall into the water?
Them intrusive thoughts, my boy.
Intrusive thoughts, right? How many people were standing at the top of a building and just looked down? And I'm not saying they're suicidal, but said, I wonder what it would be like to just plunge to the bottom and hit the floor. How many people thought of what it would feel like to get shot or stab somebody or get stabbed and shot yourself? I know this is fucked up, but intrusive thoughts and testing your mental capacity to that, it will be tested in regards to that. And I'm not saying that's something that intrusive thoughts is something that you have to address and work on. It only becomes an issue when that intrusive thoughts blocks you from you evolving to what you need to be. But let's not act like there aren't those intrusive thoughts there. Now, so why am I saying all that? Back to Tiamat, so we don't get why I say Tiamat is violent. Not violent just in the sense of what we know the definition of physical violence is. I wasn't really saying it in that regards. There's a spiritual violence with Tiamat. I can't really describe in human terms because you feel like you've been in a mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual war when you try to unveil her mysteries, because there's rage, there's anger, there's wisdom, it's just an influx of a multitude of emotions and energy that you go through. Because when we look at Tiamat as being one of the main, as they say, primordial mothers, right, or primordial feminine energy, she gives birth to a lot of that. And we know Kali is a primordial goddess, right? And she comes from that lineage of energy, right? She falls into that category. I look at her as being a manifestation of primordial chaos, right? That's how.
Yep. Yeah, that's a grand. That's on the money.
That's the best way I could describe it.
Wow.
So, interesting stuff.
That's a great way you described Tiamat. Also, I would like to work more with her, but I know that if that one light touch turned into a full palm, I don't know what's gonna happen to me, boy.
100%. All right, I think that will wrap us up. Take us here to the end. But listen, I wanna thank you for coming by. I appreciate you spending, the time with us. We'll definitely do this again. So, if anything you want to say in closing, go ahead and let you say that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. First of all,
appreciate
thank
you coming
for
by.
all our awesome chats and for just introducing me to the fact that it's not just okay to live this side of life, but necessary and possible, right? I also want to leave with this saying, like, it's okay to push your own boundaries so that you can be more open to love. This is something that I have really been learning for a long time. And I wish somebody had said it to me like that. So if you are struggling in any way, it is okay for you to offer that part of yourself.
Yes.
Love. And that's what shadow work is really for, in my opinion. Learn to love that part of yourself with the right form of love,
Yes, 100%. Appreciate that. All right, Dragon Jasper, thank you.
You're welcome. If y'all want to talk to me some more, find me on Instagram, Dragon Jasper Energy. Find me on my website, dragonjasper.com, and my YouTube, Dragon Jasper.
Right. Appreciate you. Yeah, check her out, support her, and check out the services she offers. And I got your I'm gonna take a look at it. I saw it right before I came on.
Okay.
So we'll take a look at that. I appreciate you. I'm gonna remove you from the room. Thank you. Have a good night.
All right,
Appreciate
see
it.
y'all later.
All right, cool. All right. So let's wrap it up. Brother Angel, you here? You want to come in for a minute? Quick minute? You want to come in? You want to stop in? I'm gonna send you the link, brother. We need to talk. Hold on. I forgot your email. Oh, Louis F. I know your email. I don't know if you're still here. I think you're still here, man. I'm gonna send you maybe stay on for a quick hot minute. I just sent to your email, your Louis F email. Stop in for a quick minute if you want. Yeah, so yeah, that was good stuff. It's good to hear from other practitioners, not be talking about some bullshit and some, I'm special and I'm deep and all that good shit. Yeah, I just sent the link, Angel. I just sent it to your Louis F email. Come through. We'll bring the elder in real quick. Talk to the elder. Let's bring the elder in. It's been a minute, man. We got to build, man. Bring Angel in real quick. All right, wait for Angel to get here. But yeah, it was good stuff, man. Good stuff. This is stuff we got to talk about, man. This is stuff that we got to address. And yeah, you see now everybody has a unique, journey. Everybody has unique things they're going through. And it's just this shit is real. And now you hear a lot of the stuff that I'm saying. You're seeing some of these guests come on, and you're like, okay, they're explaining. Look, not everybody's experiences are identical, as I said, but you're seeing now the similarity. You're going, okay, yeah, this shit is real. So I'm gonna bring Brother Angel in, aka I call him Elder Tata. We're gonna bring him in for a little bit, maybe talk for a little bit, a little more time before we get out of here. I got a little bit more time. I gotta get ready to do some stuff. So let's get Angel up in here in a minute. I know he got the link. He's probably fixing his hair and stuff. Now let me stop. Just give me a minute. Yeah, so good stuff. Yeah, as you know, Brother Angel, Brother Tata, he's done some of the African witchcraft and sorcery classes. He's got some experience with that. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that for maybe 20 or 30 minutes before I wrap this thing up. I'm getting a little antsy here myself. Got a lot of personal stuff going on. When I say personal stuff, I got a family, very close person to me on hospice right now. I'm not going to get into details. So you know how that goes if you've been through that. And it's not fun. I've been dealing with it for the last week, and it's kind of an any moment thing. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of us have been through it. We know. Doesn't make it any easier. I'm gonna be honest with you, it really don't. And I've been through this a bunch of times, unfortunately. I'm not saying that like that's a badge of honor to wear, because it's not. It's very mentally taxing. Okay. But yeah, so I'm a little mentally drained today. I don't know what Angel's doing. I'll wait a few more minutes. I don't know. Maybe he can't come through. I don't know. Oh, it's just a Baphomet pendant I got off of the internet. I don't know if you guys can see it. It just caught my eye. You know me, I collect these things. Well, actually, they're charged. That's one thing I want to do a video on, charging amulets. I haven't really touched on that. Occult the jewelry. All right. Appreciate that, Jermaine. Appreciate that, man. Yeah. And all I'll say is it's my stepmom. That's who it is. And it's tough for me because when my biological mom passed away, here's the unique story behind it. It's crazy. And I think I mentioned this a few years back. My stepmom now, who's also my godmother, my godmother and my mother were best friends growing up as kids. And my father knew my stepmom. They all used to hang out together when they were younger, but my father got with my mom, they got married, and my stepmom and my mom were best friends. But after my mom passed, as fate would have it, years later, my father ran into her best friend in the early 2000s. Crazy story. So they wind up linking up and getting married. So it's just crazy. It's literally like second mom, and being close to her like a second mother. So it feels like it's a biological mother. So yeah, it's never an easy thing to deal with. Regardless, I've been through it several times. Been through this with my father. Been through it with my biological mother. I've been through it with my son's first mother. Yeah. So for those that've been through it, But what helps is us understanding. This path helps you understand it. Tata Louie, what's going on, brother?
Howdy. Can you hear
Man,
me?
hey, been a minute, man. I saw you in the chat. I said, man, I gotta bring the elder in just to check on you, man.
Hey, old friend, I was just passing through.
Hey, on the real, I told you. Shortly, I'm gonna be up there shortly. I told you that last time.
Yeah.
So
When you coming up?
we in April. I'm looking to take a trip in there late May, early June, or well, probably right after my birthday if it's in June. It's either late May, or if not late May, immediately the midpoint of June. But I will definitely keep you posted on that.
Yes, sir.
And we definitely got to get together. But I see some stuff popping up in there about, I don't know if it was Sanse or Puerto Rican voodoo, or I saw something about the 7th and 8th, 9th books of Moses.
Yeah, Bliss threw that in the chat,
Yeah. I mean, I dabbled in that stuff. So I wanted to bring you in here and maybe shift the conversation a little bit, and maybe talk a little bit about that. All right.
All
Maybe
right,
we
cool.
build on
Yeah, well, I was brought up in Puerto Rican spiritism in New York City
that. Okay.
back in the 60s. So, like, that was a little before a lot of the Sansi and the 21 divisions, people started influxing into New York City. So a
Right.
lot of that stuff wasn't seen in Puerto Rican white table mediumship that I
Gotcha.
saw. I mean, we had like what you call templos, which were like storefronts where people used to work misa with white table.
Correct.
White table seances for those who don't know Spanish, and they generally dealt with Allan Kardec stuff, the prayers from the Allan Kardec book and stuff like that. It was one big table in the front, and basically they were set up like meeting style or auditorium style. The table in the front facing an audience, rows of chairs, white sheet on the table, white candle, one big goblet of water. And the mediums would sit alongside of the back of the table, and they would address the audience.
Right.
And that's how
Yeah.
they summon spirits and stuff like
Yep.
that.
Yeah. I wanted to add this. Well, real quick. Shout out to you, brother Blade Ashtaroth. I know you laid your father to rest last Thursday, man.
My
Definitely.
condolences.
Yeah. Rest in power, man, to your pops. So I know I've been there, done that. I'm sure a lot of us have. It doesn't make it any easier, So believe me, brother. I know that feeling, man. You feel like you lose a part of yourself, especially if you were close. I mean, I was fortunate. I was close with both of my parents, man. You know, a lot of us can't make that claim. Unfortunately, a lot of us are the byproduct of one parent households, which is fucked up. But I was fortunate. I was blessed. My parents had a full marriage to the end, man, and I was blessed in that regards. Always had that male and female presence in the house, and I always loved my parents, man. Love my pop, love my mom to death. Nothing bad to say about them. Literally, I can say it. I'm not talking about, we all got our ass whooped, and I'm not talking about that. Yeah, we all, I hate your ass. You know, when we were kids, we got beat. No, I'm not talking about that shit, but I love my parents to death, man. It's a hard thing losing a parent, man. It's a different feeling. But yeah, to what you were saying, Tata Louis, it's similar to how, like in my godmother, and when I was in Santeria, that's how they pretty much do Mises. Very similar.
Yeah, question, was your godmother Puerto Rican or Cuban?
Yes, she was Puerto Rican.
Yeah, that's the Puerto Rican style,
100%.
Yeah.
And that's how they did it. We opened the Mises with Alan Kardec's prayers. We used the actual book that you see in the Botanicus. It was weird, but I won't say it was weird. And you probably know this because yes, she was Puerto Rican. And we would at first, because I'm going back a while now. I'm going back to the late '90s, early 2000s when I first started, coming up under her and in her house. They would open with a lot of, Alan Kardec spiritism prayers and some Christian prayers. And then we would go into calling the ego down and playing the drums. Right. So it was this incorporation of cardism and spiritism and white table mediumship, like you described. We were just like you described it. There was the altar with the white cloth on it. We had flowers. She would have she would take the Sandelo 1800 Florida water and this big pot of herbs. She would have a bundle of herbs in front of it because, in these Mises, people would get called up. There was cleanses going on. Spirits were being brought down. But it was always in a circle. And then there was a chair in the center. And somebody would always get on the hot seat. We did those things because we did work on people. We would tell whatever would come through. And she would sit in the center. We would sit to the left and right of her. And it was crazy because she could tell when you're feeling a thought. Like how many times in a misa, she said to me, Michael, say something. That's what she would say to me. And I'm like, damn, how the fuck she know what I'm thinking? Like how she that white table median shit. Don't sleep on it. That shit is real. But anyway, go ahead.
Man. Yeah, man. That's I've been a recipient of a lot of those cleanings, even as a kid.
Right.
I've seen
so she took the Florida water, sprinkled it on the herbs, and then lit them on fire, and then just cleaned it.
And everybody had to walk over the fire as it was lit. Yeah, man. Those were the good old days.
Yep, the good old days. But go ahead, man. I don't want to ruin your train of thought, but you just because when you talk, brother, man, you just bring up shit comes to my head. But go ahead.
You know how we do it. It's two-way street. You say stuff, I remember stuff. I say stuff, you remember stuff.
There you
we
go.
meet in the middle. We come to an.
Yo, and no matter how long, we may not talk for a little bit, but I feel like we jump right in, man. We don't miss a beat, bro.
Calling me from Virginia, but I'm gonna put him on hold. He'll be like,
no worries.
Then he'd be all right. He's at work or probably getting out of work, just checking in. But everything's good on my end. Same old stuff.
Good.
I'm here, brother. I'm here.
Okay.
But as for interesting interview tonight with Dragon Jasper, I appreciate a lot of what she said, and it's no coincidence. Balkan Mom just has done is closing it out though, a Kali meditation. If you go to his website, he's offering it, and I was looking at it, but I don't got the time to really focus in on that stuff. But I'm a real funny dude. I don't jump into stuff until I do my due diligence.
No, 100%.
That's why it took me 100,000 years being into Lukumi system to get into Palo.
Correct.
Because I didn't like a lot of the cats that was dealing Palo, and it was the Cuban Exodus. I'm not prejudiced, but a lot of them cats were they were from not too nice places.
Right.
And I didn't like the vibe. It took me a minute, but it is what it is.
Right. No, 100%, man. I agree with you. You got to do your due diligence. But what I definitely got to do, and again, I don't want to hold you up if you got to go.
Nah, man, I'm sitting on the couch watching the
Oh, you
crime show.
good? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
man, I'm
Yeah, but I
thanking God I'm
definitely
not in the crime show.
good. No,
They ain't
I
looking
was
for me.
telling people I gotta keep you abreast that next we'll have an African witchcraft and sorcery segment coming up on the Patreon. So I definitely want you to swing by, man. Because that even from the couple of times you came by, especially that PowerPoint presentation you did, man, it helped a lot of people, man. The way you broke down the history, the different tribes, the origin of Palo. Tata, he's being very humble right now. Don't sleep. Tata's been around for a while, especially up in the New York area. He can tell you
Ah,
about.
man, now you telling everybody
Nah, nah,
my
nah.
age, brother B. You tell them I'm old as dirt.
No. He's being humble. He don't
Just
talk
couldn't
about it
go,
a
Fred.
lot, but I've learned a lot from him, and I'm a baby in that system compared to Tata. I've learned a lot from listening to him, even though I've had my experiences. But when somebody's the real deal, and you listen to them talk. And it's not just they're talking about their experiences, but yeah, Tata's being a little humble. He's got a lot of wisdom. He'll break stuff down, especially when it comes to that path. I mean, he's thorough not just on this path, but I'm saying when it comes to this path, when he's talking, listen, because he's got a thorough amount of experience. But what is your thought on those working with the fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth, ninth books of Moses, and doing working with the seals of Solomon and doing like that type of system? Now, I've incorporated it, but I've made my own changes. I'm not going to say I follow it to how it is in those books, but why I wanted to bring in, because I saw that come up, and it's an interesting topic because I see people have different approaches to it. So, one of the reasons why I wanted you to come in. What's your thoughts on that, Tata?
Well,
And maybe you could share some past
is a
experiences.
Bliss still on the channel with us? Is a Bliss still on?
Yeah, I think he's still here. Yeah, I see it.
Okay. Because it seems to me that he has experience with utilizing both systems. See, in Puerto Rican spiritualism, pure Puerto Rican spiritualism, we don't utilize that
Right,
system in it. But my
right,
thoughts on that is like, I can see it because there have been books written about using that system with certain rituals and stuff. But I'm a purist. I honestly believe if you're working with one system, even though you can be in the multiple systems, one
correct.
system at a time. But that's just what I was taught. I mean, if you're doing Wiccan ritual, for those of us who do that stuff, you're gonna do Wiccan ritual.
Hmm.
You're not gonna mix it with other stuff, even
No,
though some Wicca does do it, and I don't know.
right.
I know that if you work in Palo, you gotta work Palo. I know if you
Yeah,
work in Orisa, you gotta work Orisa.
that's correct.
If you work in Ifa, you gotta let them old guys do what they do.
That's correct.
If you're
No, I agree
working,
with.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to touch. I agree with you. You just said a minute ago. You could work multiple systems, but I agree. When you're working on something, work on that. Like you could
Hmm.
be working with Luciferian practice. You could be working with Palo. But if I'm working with Palo in that moment, I'm just fucking with Palo. I'm
Yeah,
not mixing
yeah.
anything else with it. Right.
Mm.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
because we can shift gears, right? Like driving, you can shift
Mhm.
gears, but you can't do it in the same road trip. You know what I mean? The way I look
No,
at it,
it's not going to turn out too good.
because some of the energies are how can I say this? Are amicable. They won't. Some of the frequencies won't vibe together the same way.
Yes.
So like it's like playing music or like I said, like cooking food. Why would you
Right.
want to put vinegar in the dessert?
No, 100%. I agree. But here's a good question. I see something in the chat here, and I know this applies to Lukumi, it applies to Palo Mayembe, it applies to Santeria. What's your thoughts? We were talking earlier. I know you were here when we were talking about when we're doing rituals, even when we're if we're using singing the songs of the Orisha, even in the rituals that is done in Lukumi and Palo Mayembe. What's your thoughts? Would you agree that doing them in the native tongue of those rituals is a much more powerful connection as opposed to doing it in English? And what's your thoughts on that?
Well, yes and no. And I'm gonna I gotta
Okay.
go back and forth here for a minute.
Go
What
ahead.
I was taught, and this is just the way I was taught, other people may work differently. I was taught that when it comes to tone and when it comes to like music, like you were saying earlier, when it comes to singing, I was taught that whatever system you're working in, it's best to work in the language that's conducive to that system.
Gotcha.
It's my old padrino, who's been dead many years now. He told me, he said it in Spanish. I'm gonna say it like he told me. I remember like yesterday. I'm gonna translate it roughly to English. He said, "Oye, habla Congo para que la ganga que te escuche mejor," which literally means speak Kikongo or Bantu so that the prender can hear you better.
Mm.
But now that's only on one aspect of it, because on another aspect of it, I've seen ritualists work speak a dialect, because there are like 7 dialects in Congo language, the Kikongo tribe, the Bantu tribe. So I've seen them speak a mixture of Bantu and Spanish in some instances, and it works out okay. I know people that, they spit that stuff out like water, like pop, 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 pop. Like,
Right.
So, I've seen it work both ways, but it's best to know the language. But I learned, a long time ago, this is off topic, but it's relatable. Try not to speak a language you are not fluent in
Right.
any magical system.
Right.
And I'm impressed by Bao Carmon, because Bao, he's got like 7 different languages on top.
Correct.
He spits Greek, he spits the Koinic, he spits Latin, he spits
Aramaic.
Aramaic, Aramaic and the Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, and biblical Hebrew. I'm like, wow.
Correct.
So I've seen that too, But I also know, and this is the flip side, when it comes to Palo and even Lukumi, Santeria stuff, the Ifa stuff, I've seen people sing mixture songs in Spanish and native Lukumi, but the preference has always been the native tongue,
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of these languages have been around for centuries, and it's amazing that a lot of them, like I've done comparison work with like the Lukumi, right, spoken in Cuba, which is a mixture of Yoruba and whatever else is in there, right, and the pure Yoruba root, and a lot of it, other than maybe tonal differences, is on point.
Mm.
And remember a lot of these slaves ain't know how to read and write.
Correct.
So imagine how 500 years or better, a lot of this stuff has been translated or passed down through generations and generations. And, a lot of them still keep it true to form,
Correct. And you mentioned the band too, right? And the band too, because I know the same thing in my house. They would they would do that mixture too. And it all depended too on when other people would come, and we did, sometimes, other houses get together, and I could see the variation. It depended on, and sometimes we would obviously visit other houses too. You know how that goes. And you would see this, right? Because I know you break down the traditions and how it's passed down. Now, I'm saying that to say this, if you can explain to people so they can get a little understanding of that culture, how does it differentiate, like each house, whether it's it could be Ifa, Lukumi, or it could be Palo Mayembe? Explain the importance and maybe the differences of how each house has its own lineage they trace their origins to, and how that can kind of sometimes there be slight differences, as far as the houses when you go house to house. I mean, I know that might be a little confusing to some that don't understand how that
No,
operates.
not at all. I get
Yeah.
it. No, not at all. In the Ifa Babalao system in Cuba,
Right.
right? They're basically, you can see, because I've traveled and I've spoken with a lot of these old guys, and you can see when they're doing ritual, you can see that there's very little variation, very slight. I mean, like so slight you can't even see it.
Right.
That's the Babalao stuff.
Right.
When it comes to the Orisa practices out of Cuba, there are only 2 main Orisa lines that come out of Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the pimienta, and I don't remember what the other one was. Pimienta and piranha.
Mm-hmm.
And those houses were descended by like the people that reconstructed this religion in Cuba. So you have the
Right.
houses of Mama Monserrate, the houses of what was her name? She lived to over 100 years old. She made
Oh,
Ocha twice.
yeah, yeah.
Oh man, I got her name on the tip of my tongue. She
Me
lived to
too.
be over 100. She made Ocha twice. I can't remember her name right now, but from those two lineages came the rest of the lineages. So, like in the Santeria, you're gonna see two main lineages coming out of two towns, coming out of either Havana or Matanza. And
Mm-hmm.
there may be some slight differences in ritual, differences in pronunciation.
Correct.
I've even seen people argue about ritual protocol because of some
Me too.
differences in minor things or major things. But yeah, as for Palo, now that's a whole different ball of wax. Because you Palo, remember, you got like four main branches, and they've all crossed or tied or stolen from each other because that's what they do. you know, a ritual, sigils, pronunciation, songs, chants, stuff like that. So you're gonna see a lot of an intermix, and you're gonna see slight variations. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen my pure Mayombes do initiation rituals, which differ slightly from the Kimbisa people, which differ
Mm-hmm.
slightly from the Briumba Congo people, which
Right.
differ slightly from the Chamalongo people, which is a very like well hidden tradition in Palo Mayombe. They're not too popular.
Right. Now, I got to ask you this because I know we talk about this in the Patreon classes, but for maybe those here that may not know, because people use the term Palo, right, and they don't realize it's not just Palo, right? There's different variations of it. We've talked about this before in the past. I find a lot of people, most of the people that refer to Palo, not all, a lot of people are more or less, and then some aren't even conscious or aware of it. What I'm basically trying to get to explain the difference is, I know there's a thorough answer to this, but I know you have a way of explaining it thoroughly. Explain the difference to people between Palo Monte and Palo Mayombe and the different lines, because there's a severe lack of knowledge of that, because even more so for people who may not be initiates and want to study it, because there's things you can do as non-initiates in Palo, but for those that may not be aware of what type of energy they're working with, because I find a lot of people are working, for an example, with Palo Monte and they're not even aware of it, as opposed to maybe different lines of Palo Mayombe. So maybe you can explain a little bit the differentiate between that for people.
Okay, as I understood it, Palo Monte is like the whole system.
Mm-hmm.
It's all Palo Monte, regardless of what branch it is, regardless if it's Mayombe, regardless if it's Kimbisa, regardless if it's Briuma or Chamalongo. It's the whole system. Because most basic Palo Monte has to do with spirits,
Mm-hmm.
ancestral spirits,
Mm-hmm.
right? Familiar spirits, and also archetypical, what we call impugnos, which are archetypical cross entities or entities wearing the deific mask of the Orisa.
Mm-hmm.
Like Chola looks a lot like a Chung, even though when you get into the mysteries, it's really not. There's a little different energy there, but they've been crossed up and intermixed that it's easy for people to confuse them that are not really into this tradition. So I would say that. I would say Mayombe is the purest African form coming right out of Mayombe in Congo, in what is it, the Bantu people, Angola, right? Coming right out of there. It's like straight off the block. Kimbisa is the more watered down version
Mm-hmm.
because Kimbisa was, I'm not going to say invented, I'm going to say it was constructed later on, and it was the offshoot of the two other lines. And it had
Correct.
a lot of intermixing with Allan Kardechism, with Lukumi Santeria.
Yes.
There was some, what do you call that? There was some come on, that other system, damn it, the lodges and stuff. My brain is going AY on me. Freemasonry in there because the creator or the founder of that order was a Freemason. There was a lot of Catholicism in there.
Oh, the Knights of
also
Columbus.
intermixed in there. No. Freemason. He was a Mason.
He was a
The André Petit Facundo, who was the founder of Ibiza, Santo Cristo Membiai, he was a Mason.
oh, damn.
Yeah, he was a Mason. Yeah, he was a Mason. So he mixed a lot of that together because he started initiating, no disrespect to anyone. You got to remember, this is 1800s, 1860 something Cuba. You know, he started initiating non-slaves or Caucasian people.
Yes.
And what happened was there was an uproar in the other traditions because they kept saying, you selling our traditions for 30 pieces of silver, so to speak. And you know, I guess in order to reinforce the tradition that he was working, you know, he had to mix other things in there to strengthen the branch of Palo. He was working. Palo is a lot like Wicca in a sense that it's got a variety of different branches, and each lineage or each house may do things according to the custom of their house or lineage.
Yes.
Like you have traditional Wicca, Gardnerian, Alexandrian, and then you got a lot of offshoots. You got eclectic, you got Dianic, you got all that other stuff. You know? They also run around something called shamanic Wicca. I don't know.
Yes. But yeah, you got me thinking of that dude in the Masonic order again, man. Because yeah, I'm going back to that. I know we brought that up. I think you discussed that in one of the Patreon classes. But yeah, what I wanted, and I'm glad you're explaining this because I want people to see.
Matter of fact, sorry to interject so much.
No,
so
go ahead.
Just like in Wicca, because you got to remember, Gerard Gardner was also a Mason.
Yes.
People don't know that.
And he's one of the fathers of Wicca.
Yeah.
Him and Raymond Buckland.
Well, Raymond Buckland was an initiate of his.
Correct.
Right. And he was a Mason. And he borrowed liberally because he didn't have much to work with when he was reconstructing that tradition. Well, 100 years earlier, André Petit Facundo in Cuba did the same thing because he really didn't have much to work with.
That's correct.
And then once he started initiating, you know, the plantation owners and the bourgeoisie and you know, the wealthy businessmen, forget it. Because remember, slavery was still intact in Cuba in the 1860s.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, there's a good question here, and I think we had brought this up.
Oh, and the
I always
similarities
this when I first came
degrees.
in. Yeah.
You got me? There were 3 degrees, just like in Wicca. I believe in Masonry, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. There are 3 basic degrees.
Yes, in Masonry and the Blue House. That's correct.
Yes. And in Palo Mayombe, it's the same thing in some houses, most houses, you know.
Correct. But here's an interesting, this is something Bliss brought up earlier. I always wondered this when I first came in too. Because you see that, for an example, like in Islam and Arabic, you know, the most people know the basic greeting, but the full greeting is, you know, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. You know, I greet you in peace in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the response is wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Now in Santeria, in a lot of these Ifa or Lukumi houses, how did that salam alaikum? How did that get into what was the origin of that? How did I mean, it's pronounced almost the same, and it's in that Arabic tongue, and it's almost pronounced the same way. How did that get in there? What's your thoughts on that? Or
my thoughts on that is what I know historically is that you got to remember the Arabic people there were a lot of let me say rogue Arabics that were assisting in the slave trade. See, a lot of people don't know that piece. They think primarily the slave trade was Europeans invading Africa. That was true. But in order to get deeper in, they had to deal with the Arabics, the Arabs. Because the Arabs control like a lot of North Africa, you know, and a lot of the coastlines, you know.
Correct.
And because that was their tongue and that was their salutation, you know, the slaves picked it up. They picked it up in Palo Mayombe, and it still exists today. It simply means peace be with you. Right?
Correct. And that was my research and origin of it when I started to look at how that crept in, because yes, when you look at some of the slave trades, even when you look at the Portuguese slave trade and how a lot of those slaves, obviously Catholicism was forced on them. And then, as we've talked in the past, the synchronization of the Catholic saints and how they got synchronized with the Orisha deities and et cetera, et cetera. You also find there was Arab slave trades, right? The Arabs were trading slaves too. So, and like you're saying, when you do some of the research, and this is why, I mean, it's crazy because there's a lot of infusion, like you say, of these different cultures and how they got in. And obviously, there's a connection, there, and there's different thoughts on it. I mean, there's different things you could research. And again, the houses have their different perspectives on it, et cetera. But yeah, I always wondered that when I was younger, when I first came in too. I was like, wait a minute. And when I first heard, I remember the first time I heard it, I was like, shit, that's an Islamic greeting, but just curious to pick your brain about that. That's all. All right.
How can a non-initiate get in touch with follow energies? Well, there's got to be a connection, and one of the things that I've had to share with a spiritual sister of mine, she's involved in Palo and she's involved in Orisa, and she's got godchildren, but she only has one prenda, which is cool. And I don't dictate to nobody, and she asked me, she said, Tata, my goddaughter got to do an offering or a connection with Siete Rayo, but she don't have Siete Rayo. I don't have Siete Rayo. You got Siete Rayo? I says, yeah. And, well, she's got to do this, that, and the third. I said, real simple. What you do is you go to the forest. You pick out one of his favorite trees, depending on where you at. Either it could be a pine tree, which is evergreen, or an oak, or the other tree, right? And you got to address the tree. I said you address the tree and you invoke or summon Siete Rayo at the base of the tree. You leave your offering there. You draw your sigil. And then she's elderly. So I said, you ain't got a period, so you can draw a sigil. In that system, women with periods, of childbearing age are limited. So you can draw the sigil. I'll give you a sigil if it'll help you. And, go do what y'all got to do. And they went and did what they had to do. Then they ended up going to a drum session, a Palo drum session later on that evening. In the drum session, someone who didn't know them got mounted by Siete Rayo, and Siete Rayo told them, yeah, I got it. So they looked at each other like, oh, snap, you heard that?
Yeah.
So there's more than one way to skin a cat,
Correct. 100%. Correct. All right, listen, I'm going to wrap this up, brother. I got to get out of here. I appreciate you stopping in. I'm definitely going to give you a buzz. I'm definitely going to shoot you that date. And maybe we need to get you on here, man. Maybe we need to do a show on here, like a mainstream show. Shoot me your schedule. Let's set something up for here too, man. We could exclusively
no
talk about
problem, brother.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
You just let me know when and where, and I'll rearrange my schedule and see what date works for both of us, and we can do this. I mean, why not?
All right. I'll give you a call. I got to tend to a few things before the morning. Listen, I appreciate you coming by. Again, shout out. Thanks to Dragon Jasper for coming by, and thanks for everybody hanging out. We'll talk soon. We'll get on here again, and I'll see you guys soon. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. And Brother Tata, we'll link up, and let's set something up. I'm gonna get you on here.
Yeah, all right, brother. You know how we do.
All right, bro.
At night. Good night, brother.
All
Enjoy
right.
the week.
All right, everybody. Peace. Love, hair grease. Let me stop, man. All right, man. Everybody stay up, stay strong, and we'll talk soon. All right.